good evening, or maybe it's already closer to morning depending on where you are. You've tuned into a frequency that doesn't quite belong to any station on your dial. It drifts in like static, only at the hour when sleep won't come and the night feels heavier than it should. Tonight, I'll be your voice in the dark. And I've brought with me 7 stories. 7 doors will open together. Some lead to strangers, staring from across the street. Some lead to lakes that whisper names back to you. Others to buses that shouldn't exist, houses that never forgive, dolls that remember, curses that linger in smoke, and a floor that no architect ever built. You may think these places are far away. You may think they can't touch you. But when the lights flicker, when the silence grows too sharp, you'll wonder if you've stepped into one of them already. So settle in, if you can. Story 1. The Watcher Across the Window. Brooklyn does not fall silent at night. It only changes its voice. During the day, the streets groan with buses, construction drills, impatient horns. But when the sun slips behind the rooftops, the borough exhales a different breath, longer, heavier, punctuated by the rattle of a passing subway car or the clink of bottles in a recycling bin. It was into this half-silence, this restless lull, that Clara stepped when she carried the last box into her new apartment. The building was older than it looked from the street. From outside, it was all brown brick and painted trim. Not unpleasant, just unremarkable. But inside the hallway, the wallpaper was peeling in strips, revealing older layers beneath, as if the walls could never quite decide what era they belonged to. The stairwell smelled faintly of varnish and boiled cabbage. Clara told herself it was part of the charm, something she would laugh about later, when she wrote letters to friends about her life in Brooklyn. The apartment itself was modest. 1 bedroom, a narrow living room, a kitchen barely large enough to turn around in. But the selling point had been the window, a single broad sash window facing the street, with a perfect rectangle of view across to another row of apartments. The realtor had called it light-filled. Clara thought of it more as a stage, frames waiting to be filled with shadows. She set her box on the table and listened. The radiator ticked with a slow, metallic rhythm. Someone upstairs was playing music, just the bass line, a low throb, almost like a heartbeat, and beneath it all the city murmured. Car tires hissing over wet pavement, voices drifting up from the sidewalk. For the first time since the move, she allowed herself to breathe. She was here. No more sublets, no more sleeping on couches. This was her space, a place to write. Clara was 27 and already haunted by deadlines. She had published 2 short stories in minor journals, nothing that paid, and worked part-time at a bookstore to cover rent. But she had come to Brooklyn for the same reason so many others had. The belief, fragile but unshakable, that the city might open its mouth and whisper opportunity if she pressed her ear to the right wall. The new apartment, she decided, would be her laboratory of silence. She would fill its nights with sentences until the words finally made sense. She unpacked slowly, arranging her notebooks on the desk by the window, setting her camera on the shelf. The camera was old, an analog SLR her father had given her before he passed. She used it more as a way to frame ideas than to take photographs. Sometimes she would sit for hours, looking through the viewfinder, waiting for a story to appear in the square of glass. That night, after stacking the last of her books, she brewed tea and sat by the window. Rain had fallen earlier. The asphalt glistened with the sheen of street lamps. Across the way, in the building directly opposite, dozens of windows glowed like aquarium tanks. In some she glimpsed kitchens, in others living rooms with television screens flickering blue. Each window was a small life contained, stories unfolding silently behind glass. Her gaze paused on one window near the top floor. The blinds were raised just enough to see inside. A man sat at a desk, hunched forward, the light of a computer screen bleaching his face. He didn't move much. From this distance, he was little more than a silhouette, but something about his stillness made Clara uneasy. Everyone else across the street moved naturally, pacing, gesturing, laughing. This man sat like a statue, his head tilted slightly toward the glow. Clara blinked and looked away. She told herself it was nothing. Everyone had their habits. Maybe he was a designer, a coder, someone absorbed in work. But when she glanced back a few minutes later, he was still there, in exactly the same position. She sipped her tea, trying not to think about it, but her eyes kept returning to that rectangle of light. By midnight, the rest of the building opposite had dimmed. Windows went dark one by one, curtains drawn, Television switched off. Only his window remained. And he remained within it, a constant presence, as if he had been waiting for the city to sleep so that he could stay awake alone. Clara set down her cup. Her fingers hovered over the old camera on the shelf. It was a reflex more than a decision. She fitted the lens, turned the focus ring, and lifted it to her eye. Through the viewfinder, the world sharpened. Rain droplets on the glass became crystalline. The bricks of the opposite building stood out with harsh texture. And the man suddenly clear, framed perfectly in the crosshairs. He was not facing the screen. He was facing outward, not directly at her perhaps, but at the window, at the night beyond. His eyes were dark pits, unreadable in the distance, but the angle of his head gave the impression of staring, watching, waiting. Clara's pulse quickened. She lowered the camera. Without the lens, he seemed vague again, a blur of shoulders and light. Maybe she had imagined the direction of his gaze. Maybe the magnification of glass had invented menace where there was none. Still, she drew the curtains halfway, enough to shield her desk. She told herself she would not think of him. She opened her notebook and began to write. Words scattering across the page, fragments of dialogue, sketches of character, but behind every sentence lurked the image of that still figure across the street. She scribbled until the page blurred, then shut the notebook with a sharp clap. Outside, a siren wailed, growing louder, then fading into the distance. Clara leaned back in her chair, exhaling. The room smelled faintly of dust and old wood. She rubbed her eyes. The move had exhausted her. It was natural, she reasoned, to feel unsettled in a new place. Everything would seem less strange in the morning. But when she stood to switch off the light, curiosity tugged at her one last time. She parted the curtain with 2 fingers and peered out. The window opposite still glowed. The man was still there, and this time she could not convince herself he was looking anywhere else. Morning came muted. The window let in a gray metallic light that softened the edges of Clara's furniture and turned the dust motes into pale ash. She woke not to an alarm but to the rumble of a garbage truck, the crash of bins against steel. For a moment she forgot where she was. The walls looked unfamiliar, the ceiling too close. Then memory returned. The move, the boxes, the window opposite. Her first impulse was to rise and draw the curtains wide. The street outside was already stirring. Shop owners rolling up shutters, a delivery van double parked, cyclists weaving dangerously between lanes. Across the way, the windows that had been dark the night before glowed with morning kitchens. She spotted a woman in a bathrobe pouring coffee, a man in gym shorts stretching before his run. Ordinary lives, blurred by distance. But the window that held her attention, the one near the top, the one that had burned all night, was empty. The blinds were half drawn. No man, no computer glow, just absence, almost too carefully arranged. Relief seeped through her chest, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps he was just a night owl. Perhaps she had inflated his presence in her mind. She made coffee, sat on the floor with her notebook, and told herself she would not look again until evening. She even managed an hour of writing, sentences forming with a tentative rhythm, as if words could stitch her into the neighborhood. But by noon she was restless. The apartment seemed too quiet. The upstairs baseline had gone silent, the hallway still. She caught herself glancing at the shelf, at the camera sitting patiently with its lens capped, like an eye waiting to open. She tried to ignore it. She left the apartment, walked to the bookstore where she worked 3 afternoons a week, and lost herself among shelves of other people's words. The store smelled of paper and ink, familiar, grounding. She almost managed to believe the night before had been nothing. Yet as dusk fell and she walked back through Brooklyn's side streets, the ones with graffiti layered like palimpsests, the ones where fire escapes zigzagged like ribs against brick, her chest tightened. The closer she came to her building, the more she felt the tug of that opposite window. By the time she climbed the stairwell and fumbled her key into the lock, her palms were damp. Inside, she tried to proceed methodically. Coat on hook, kettle on stove, lamp switched on, but her eyes betrayed her. Even before the water boiled, she found herself moving to the window, parting the curtain just enough. The blinds across the way had been lifted again. The room within was dim, lit only by the computer's screen, and the man was there. He sat in exactly the same posture as before, his face tilted toward the glow. Tonight, though, there was movement. His hands worked at the desk, cutting, arranging, the faint rise of his shoulders betraying concentration. On the wall behind him, shapes were gathering rectangles, slivers of color. At this distance, they resembled nothing more than posters. But through her camera lens, she reached for it before she could stop herself, slid the strap over her neck, lifted it to her eye. The lens tightened the world. Suddenly, the shapes on the man's wall sharpened. They were faces, photographs, dozens of them, pinned in uneven lines, overlapping, and not just photographs, fragments, half faces, eyes without mouths, mouths without cheeks. He was collaging people into grotesque new identities. Clara's throat went dry. Her finger hovered over the shutter button, but she didn't press it. This was not an image she wanted to capture, not something she wanted to keep. Instead, she lowered the camera, heart hammering. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, startling her so violently she almost dropped the lens. She made her tea with trembling hands, trying to rationalize. Maybe he was an artist. Brooklyn was full of them. Maybe this was just his medium, his disturbing way of expression. Plenty of people made collages. Plenty of galleries paid for them. The explanation sounded plausible in her head, but her body refused to believe it. The hairs on her arms prickled. She had the irrational sense that every photograph on his wall carried the weight of a real, breathing person someone observed, someone taken. She sat at her desk, notebook open, pen poised, but the words would not come. She kept glancing at the window, waiting for movement, waiting for proof that he was ordinary. Instead, she saw him stand, briefly, to tack another fragment to the wall. In that moment, the screen's light caught his profile. Not monstrous, not scarred, just empty, the sort of face you'd forget in a crowd, which somehow made it worse. Her thoughts spiraled. Had she seen any of those faces before? Were they strangers, or was she simply failing to place them? The city was dense with encounters. People brushed past her every day on the subway, in checkout lines, on sidewalks. She imagined the man following them, capturing them not with a lens but with something more insidious, memorizing, collecting, slicing them apart. She pushed back from the desk, pacing the small room. She tried reading, but the words swam. She tried music, but the headphones made her feel blind, vulnerable. At last, she gave in. She lifted the camera again, this time focusing not on the wall but on the desk. What she saw curdled her stomach. Spread across the desk were photographs, dozens of them, scattered like a deck of cards, faces, torsos, pieces of hair, and among them she froze the unmistakable curve of her own cheek, her own hairline, a candid shot. She recognized the jacket she had worn the day she moved in. Somehow, he had taken her image, and it was lying there among the scraps. Her hand shook so violently the camera blurred. She lowered it, pressed her palm to her mouth to stifle the gasp. It was impossible. She had never seen a flash, never posed. The photo must have been taken from the street, or from some other vantage point she had not noticed. The idea of it, that she had already been cataloged, cut, prepared, sent a chill deep into her bones. She shut the curtains completely. The room plunged into a cocoon of yellow lamplight. She sat on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, rocking slightly like a child. Outside, traffic throbbed, voices lifted, life went on. But within her apartment, the air grew heavy, taut, as if the walls were listening. Clara whispered to herself, "It's fine. It's just art. Just art." The words rang hollow. She tried to sleep, but long after midnight, unable to resist, she crept to the window again. Just a sliver, just enough to peek. The man was still there, still cutting, still pasting, and on the wall behind him, among the patchwork faces, something new was emerging. The outline of a woman's face, larger than the others. Familiar. Hers. Sleep came in fragments, like shards of glass scattered across the night. Clara drifted in and out, her body heavy but her mind restless, snagging on images that refused to dissolve. The pale wall opposite, the constellation of faces pinned to it, the scrap of her own cheek waiting to be assembled into something larger. She dreamed of scissors snipping in the dark, of paper rustling like dry leaves, of a hand cutting through the air just above her throat. When morning arrived, she felt no relief. The light seemed thin, anemic. She pulled the curtains wide, half hoping the room across the way would be empty again, that she could laugh at herself for being paranoid. Instead, she found the blinds fully raised, the window open to the gray day. The man was absent. but the wall remained visible, and there it was, the shape that had haunted her, an oval emerging from fragments, the outline of a woman's head. Even at a distance, Clara could see the angle of the jaw, the sweep of hair, familiar, inevitable, hers. Her stomach clenched. She told herself not to look. She showered, dressed, went out. On the subway, she clung to the metal pole, watching the blur of tunnels, telling herself she was safe among strangers. But every reflection in the glass looked like his. Every flicker of movement at the periphery seemed to follow her. In the bookstore, she shelved novels with robotic precision, unable to remember which authors went where. When customers spoke, their words floated past her, muffled, irrelevant. All she could see was the wall of faces, waiting, arranging themselves without her. That evening, she lingered on the street corner before going inside. The windows opposite glowed like watchful eyes, one after another. She tried to pick out which belonged to him, but in the daylight, the details blurred. By the time she climbed to her own apartment, the sky had darkened, and when she set down her bag, she realized she was trembling. She told herself she would not look. She cooked pasta, ate standing at the counter, washed dishes slowly, deliberately. She even opened her notebook, forcing her pen to move, but sentences bled into nonsense. Her thoughts slid back to the window, to the wall. By 9 o'clock, her resistance cracked. She lifted the camera. The lens revealed more than she wanted. The portrait on the wall had advanced. The man had filled the oval with fragments of skin, mouth, eyes. They didn't quite align, cheeks mismatched, lips twisted, but the resemblance was undeniable. It was her, a grotesque version of her, pieced together from images she never knew existed. The sight made her recoil, almost dropping the camera. She pressed her back against the wall, breath shallow. How? She whispered to herself. He couldn't have followed her, she would have noticed. He couldn't have broken in, she would have heard. Yet there she was, multiplied in pieces, staring back at her from across the street. She felt suddenly porous, as if her life had been leaking without her consent. Her privacy sliced apart and reassembled. The city outside pressed on. A siren rose, distant and mournful. A couple argued in the street below, their voices rising, fading. In her room, silence swelled. She paced, hugging herself. She thought of calling a friend, but who? Her circle was small, scattered. And what would she say? That a stranger was making a collage of her face? It sounded like paranoia, delusion. The police would laugh, or worse, dismiss her as unstable. Writers were always a little unhinged, weren't they? Still, she couldn't stay passive. She lifted the camera again, zooming closer. The man was at his desk, shoulders bent. He moved with calm precision, scissors glinting as they snipped. Each motion was deliberate, ritualistic. He lifted a fragment, considered it, then pressed it into place. Slowly, methodically, he was finishing her. Her pulse throbbed in her temples. She whispered, "Stop," as if he could hear, as if words alone might interrupt the ritual. But his hands kept moving. She gripped the camera until her knuckles blanched. Then, for the first time, he paused. His head tilted, just slightly, as though sensing her gaze. Clara froze. Through the lens, his face blurred, then sharpened as he turned slowly, deliberately toward the window, toward her. Their eyes met through glass and darkness and magnification. The effect was electric. Clara's body recoiled, heart hammering, but she couldn't lower the camera. His stare locked her in place. It was not anger, not surprise. It was recognition, as if he had been waiting for this contact all along. He smiled, a small, tight smile, and then he raised his hand. Not in greeting, but in demonstration. Between his fingers, he held another photograph, one she couldn't quite see. With deliberate slowness, he placed it on the wall, pressing it into the portrait where the left eye should be. When he stepped aside, Clara saw it clearly. Her eye. Not just any eye, but hers. Unmistakable, framed by the curve of her brow. She dropped the camera, gasping. The strap yanked against her neck, jolting her back. She stumbled, knocking into the desk, scattering notebooks. Her breath came ragged, almost sobbing. She pressed her palms to her face. The pressure of her own skin felt foreign, as if she too were made of pieces, taped together. Minutes passed before she dared to look again. The window opposite was dark, blinds drawn. He had vanished. leaving only the afterimage of his smile imprinted on her mind. That night she couldn't write, couldn't read. She sat on the floor with her back to the wall, knees hugged to her chest, waiting for dawn. Every creak of the building, every whisper of wind through the radiator felt like intrusion. She swore she heard footsteps in her hallway, but when she pressed her ear to the door, there was nothing, only silence, thick as cloth. In the morning she forced herself outside. The city air tasted of exhaust and rain. She walked aimlessly, through streets lined with bodegas, past children skipping rope, past a preacher shouting on the corner. Yet even among the crowds she felt exposed, as if his gaze had followed her beyond the window. She caught herself scanning faces, searching for him, but no one looked back. Or perhaps everyone did. At a cafe she scribbled in her notebook, desperate to reclaim her craft. But the words turned into descriptions of him, of the collage, of the way her own likeness had stared from the wall. She tore out the pages, crumpled them, threw them away. Still, the image remained, carved behind her eyelids. By the time she returned home, evening had fallen again. She told herself she would not look. She made tea, played music, lit candles, yet the compulsion was irresistible. By 10 she was back at the window, camera lifted. The blinds were raised once more. The wall was nearly full, and there she was, completed, a face assembled from fragments, twisted yet undeniable, her mouth crooked, her eyes mismatched, her skin patchwork from different shades, but hers all the same. The collage stared outward, larger than life, impossible to ignore. Clara lowered the camera, shaking. The portrait seemed to vibrate in her vision, lingering even when she shut her eyes. She whispered again, "Stop," but the silence across the street offered no reply. Only the steady hum of the city, indifferent, endless. That night she dreamed she stood inside his room, the smell of glue and paper thick in her nostrils. The walls pulsed with faces, hundreds of them, whispering in overlapping voices, and at the center of them all was her own, smiling a smile she had never made. The city rumbled beneath Clara's window, a restless tide of engines, horns, footsteps. But inside her apartment the air had thickened, grown viscous, as if sound itself were reluctant to cross the threshold. She sat hunched at her desk, curtains drawn halfway, the camera on the table like a silent witness. All day she had fought the impulse to look, and all day she had failed. Each time her eyes slid toward the opposite building, her chest constricted. The collage had grown. It had become impossible to deny. By now the portrait filled nearly the entire wall. Her face, her corrupted double, gazed outward from across the street. Each fragment was imperfect, each seemed jagged, but together they formed a whole that mocked her own reflection. It was like seeing herself through a broken mirror, a version assembled not by chance but by intention. And intention meant knowledge. He knew her well enough to build her piece by piece. Clara hadn't written in days. Her notebook lay open but blank, the pen resting like a useless instrument. Even in the bookstore, she had been unable to concentrate. A customer had asked where the biographies were, and she had simply stared, unable to process the words. All she could see were scissors cutting, tape pressing, fragments aligning. That night, she told herself, she would end it. She would march across the street, climb his stairs, confront him. She rehearsed the sentences in her head. "I know what you're doing. I know you have my picture. Stop, or I'll call the police." The words sounded strong enough in her imagination, but the moment she glanced through the lens again, all courage drained away. Because the portrait was finished, it stared back at her, complete, uncanny. The curve of her jaw, the angle of her brows, the part in her hair, distorted, yes, but unmistakable. She saw herself, yet not herself, a stranger wearing her skin, and beneath it, written in uneven letters across the bottom of the wall, were words. She blinked, adjusted the focus. They weren't painted. They were typed, projected from the glow of his computer screen. The letters were harsh, white against black. "You are already in my house." Her blood turned to ice. She lowered the camera with trembling hands, blinked, lifted it again. The words remained, glaring, immovable. She checked her locks instinctively, front door, deadbolt, chain, all secure. But the phrase echoed inside her skull, corrosive, "already in my house." It didn't make sense. Unless his message wasn't about her crossing into his apartment, unless he was already in hers. The thought struck like lightning. Her breath stuttered. She turned slowly, scanning the corners of her room. Shadows huddled near the ceiling, beneath the table, along the radiator. Each seemed deeper than it should be. She listened, straining past the drum of her pulse. A faint creak answered, wood shifting in the hallway. She swallowed, every muscle taut. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She forced herself to cross the room, checking closets, under the bed, behind the bathroom door. Nothing. Empty. But emptiness didn't reassure her. Emptiness could be staged. She backed into the living room, camera still in hand, and peered once more across the street. The window opposite was dark. The blinds had been drawn again. The collage, the computer, the words vanished, as though they had never existed. Her own reflection stared back from her glass, pale and frantic. She sank into the chair, rocking forward. It's in your head, she told herself. Stress, exhaustion, you're turning shadows into monsters. But her body refused the comfort. Her skin crawled with certainty. Someone had touched her things. She noticed the smallest details now. The angle of the notebooks slightly shifted. The position of the lamp nudged half an inch. The glass she'd left in the sink, now on the counter. Each sign a whisper. He's been here. The night deepened. The city's voice receded, leaving only the faint hiss of the radiator. Clara wrapped herself in a blanket, sat against the wall, eyes locked on the door. Sleep hovered just out of reach, teasing, cool. Every time her eyelids drooped, she saw the words flare again, searing white on black. You are already in my house. She jerked awake, heart racing, the blanket clutched like armor. At some hour past midnight, she thought she heard the faintest click, plastic against plastic. She froze, listening. It came again, closer this time. A camera shutter, not hers. A sound from inside her apartment, delicate but unmistakable. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She spun, searching, but the darkness offered nothing. The sound did not repeat. She told herself it was imagination, auditory hallucination born of fear. And yet, when she gathered the courage to lift her own camera, she found the battery drained. She was certain she had charged it. Certain, which meant it had been used. She gripped the camera like a weapon, though it offered no protection. Her gaze darted to the window once more, and there, impossibly, the blinds had parted. A sliver of light leaked through. Within it, the man sat at his desk again, hands folded, smiling faintly. Behind him, the collage glowed, her face luminous in the screen's projection, and beneath it the words returned, blazing brighter than before. You are already in my house. Her scream never came. The sound lodged in her throat, suffocating. She stumbled back, hit the wall. The man did not move. His smile widened, patient. Then the computer screen flickered. The words vanished, replaced by an image. Her own apartment, her own window, from an angle above her, as though a camera had been planted somewhere inside. Clara staggered forward, scanning the room, eyes darting to corners, shelves, ceiling. She found nothing, but the screen opposite showed everything. Her desk, her bed, her trembling figure at the window. He raised a hand, gestured as though conducting. On the screen, her image mimicked the movement, live, unfiltered. She collapsed to the floor, hands covering her face. The certainty struck cold. Her apartment was no longer hers. Every object, every shadow could be his. The walls that had promised safety now whispered betrayal. She did not sleep that night. She sat frozen until dawn, the camera clutched uselessly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the words that no longer needed to be written. They echoed anyway, deeper than language, etched into the marrow of her bones. You are already in my house. Dawn bled slowly into Brooklyn, a gray seepage that softened the rooftops and turned the wet streets into mirrors. Clara had not moved from her spot against the wall. Her camera lay heavy in her lap, a useless talisman. Her eyes burned from sleeplessness, yet every blink conjured the same image, the glowing words, the smile, the view of her own apartment playing across his screen. She told herself, again and again, that she couldn't let this continue. Fear was a kind of paralysis, and if she stayed paralyzed, she would rot here, eaten alive by his gaze. Something had to break. By 9 a.m., the city had woken. Delivery trucks rattled down the block. Children shrieked on their way to school. Shop fronts clanged open. Clara stood, legs trembling, and dressed without thinking. Jeans, sweater, shoes. She tucked the camera into her bag. Her body moved on instinct, bypassing the part of her mind that screamed, "Don't go, don't look, don't step outside." Down the stairwell, past the smell of varnish and cabbage, across the street, she stood on the opposite sidewalk, staring up at his building. From here, the windows looked ordinary, anonymous. She found the one she knew, the window that had burned through her nights, and saw nothing but pale curtains. The buzzer panel beside the door was smeared with grime. She scanned the names, handwritten labels, fading ink. No name that belonged to him or to anyone familiar. She pressed randomly, and the door buzzed faintly, unlatching. Inside, the hallway was narrower than hers, lined with peeling paint. The silence was uncanny, as if the building had been abandoned long before she arrived. Her footsteps echoed as she climbed the stairs. Third floor, fourth. She counted doors, tracing the geometry against what she had seen from across the street, until she found it the apartment opposite hers, the one that held the window. The door stood ajar. Clara froze. Her breath clouded faintly in the still air. Every instinct told her to turn back, but compulsion pressed harder. She pushed the door with her fingertips. Hinges groaned. The gap widened. Inside, the apartment was empty. Not sparsely furnished empty. Bare floorboards stretched beneath her shoes, dust coating every surface. The walls were stripped. No photographs, no collage, no furniture at all. Only the faint imprint where a desk might once have stood, pale wood contrasting against darker grime. Her stomach dropped. She stepped further in, heart pounding. The room smelled of old plaster, untouched for months. A window loomed at the far end, wide and bare, staring directly into her own apartment across the street. It was impossible. She had watched him there. She had seen him smile, seen his scissors, his computer screen. Yet the dust told another story. No one had lived here in years. Her knees weakened. She staggered toward the window, gripping the sill for balance. Through the glass, she saw her own apartment curtains half drawn, lamp askew, notebooks scattered, evidence of her sleepless nights. A perfect mirror. She pressed her forehead against the pane, trembling. Had she imagined it all? A hallucination born of stress, isolation, exhaustion? Was she losing herself in the city's static, inventing a stranger to embody her fears? And then she noticed it, a mark on the sill, thin, sharp, the scrape of metal against wood. Beside it, the faint residue of adhesive, as though something had been mounted here. A camera, a lens pointed directly at her apartment. Her breath hitched. She staggered back, pulse roaring in her ears. The emptiness of the room turned hostile, like a mouth waiting to swallow her. She spun, fled down the stairs, through the silent hall, out into the noise of the street. Sunlight struck her face, blinding, unreal. She crossed back to her building, almost running, fumbling for her keys. She climbed the stairwell, slammed her door shut, locked every bolt, every chain, and still the air inside felt invaded. Her apartment looked wrong, subtly altered, the notebooks stacked too neatly. The blanket folded when she was certain she had left it in a heap. A glass on the counter, rim wet as though freshly used. She backed toward the window, clutching her camera. Across the street, the curtains in the opposite apartment hung motionless, concealing only dust and emptiness. Nothing stirred, yet behind her, the air thickened. She heard it then, a soft click, not from outside, from within, the sound of a shutter. Her breath stalled. She turned slowly, heart slamming against her ribs. The room was empty, but the sound had been real. It vibrated in her bones, undeniable. The curtains swayed though the window was closed. The shadows at the corner of the room seemed to shift, subtly, as if something moved just beyond sight. She lifted her camera with trembling hands, aimed it blindly into the darkness, pressed the shutter. The flash burst, white and violent. When the afterimage cleared, the room was unchanged, but her camera whirred. The display lit up, showing the photograph she had just taken. Her throat constricted, because on the tiny screen, Standing just behind her in the frame was the man, his face blurred, fragmented, stitched like the collages on the wall, his smile stretched wider than it should. And the worst part, he was not looking at her. He was looking directly into the lens. Clara dropped the camera. The screen cracked, but the image lingered in her vision. She stumbled back against the wall, breath coming in ragged bursts. She wanted to scream, to flee, to tear the apartment apart searching for him, but her body would not move. In the silence, a voice whispered, almost tender, almost close enough to brush her ear. "I told you, you're already inside." The lights flickered. The radiator hissed like laughter. The shadows closed in, and Clara understood, too late, that she had never been alone. Story 2 echoes from the Black Lake. Lakes, remember, they don't reflect the world above them, they keep what has fallen in. Every voice, every secret, every last breath. Black Lake remembers them all, and sometimes when it chooses, it gives those voices back. Claire had never been to the lake at night until Ethan suggested it. He said it would be quiet, romantic even, away from the crowds and neon of the town, a place to breathe. She agreed, half because she wanted the silence, and half because she wanted to believe him when he said things like that. Ethan had a way of making small adventures sound like ceremonies. The path down was crooked, carved decades ago by fishermen and campers. The trees loomed taller than the lampposts could reach, so the glow of the town dimmed quickly behind them. By the time they reached the clearing, only the moon remained to guide them, turning the lake into a black mirror. Claire shivered. The air by the water carried a strange weight, cooler than it should have been. Ethan noticed and tugged at the scarf around his neck, a deep red wool, the one she had given him last Christmas. He wrapped it gently around her shoulders. "You'll freeze," he teased. "I'm fine," she murmured, but she didn't take it off. The scarf smelled faintly of cedar and smoke from his old jacket. It anchored her, though she wasn't sure why she suddenly needed anchoring. They walked along the shore, their footsteps crunching on gravel and damp earth. The lake was perfectly still, too still. Not even the smallest breeze stirred the surface. Claire kept glancing at it, waiting for ripples, waiting for proof that it was just water, but the glassy expanse only stared back, vast and unblinking. "Hard to believe something this quiet is only 20 minutes from Main Street," Ethan said. He slipped his hands into his pockets, eyes on the reflection of the moon. "Makes you think the town doesn't exist anymore, huh?" Claire nodded, though her attention was elsewhere. She had the oddest sensation of being listened to. Not by Ethan, not by the forest, by the lake itself, as though the black surface were an ear tilted toward her, waiting. They found a bench, warped and leaning from years of weather. Ethan sat and patted the space beside him. She joined reluctantly, keeping her gaze away from the water. "You okay?" he asked. It feels strange out here. It's just new. You'll get used to it." She wanted to believe that, but the heaviness pressing against her chest said otherwise. She opened her mouth to answer, then froze, because a sound rose from the lake. Not a splash, not a frog, a voice. It was soft, almost indistinct, but shaped into syllables, and those syllables formed her name. Claire. Her heart stumbled. She whipped her head toward Ethan. "Did you?" But he was looking at her curiously, head tilted. "Did I what? You didn't hear that?" "Hear what?" She stared at the water, perfectly still, perfectly black, reflecting the moon. Her own pale face hovered there, eyes wide, lips parted. She searched for ripples, for the throw of a pebble, for any sign of intrusion. There was nothing. "I think," she faltered. "I think it said my name." Ethan blinked. Then, to her dismay, he smiled. "The lake?" "Yes, the lake." Her voice was sharper than intended. He chuckled, shaking his head. "You've been reading too many ghost stories." But the laughter didn't quite reach his eyes. She saw the tightness at the corners of his mouth, the way his shoulders stiffened. He might not have admitted it, but he had felt something too. They sat in uneasy silence. The woods creaked. A loon called in the distance, eerie and drawn out. Claire gripped the scarf tighter around her shoulders. Then the voice came again. "Jump." The word slid into her ear like a needle. Her breath caught. She turned sharply to Ethan, but this time his face had changed. His smile had vanished. He was staring at the water with a strange blankness, as though listening to music she couldn't hear. "Ethan?" she whispered. He blinked. slowly, like waking from a trance. Then his gaze shifted to her, unfocused. "Did you say something?" She shook her head. No, but she wasn't sure anymore. The words still reverberated inside her skull. Jump. It was command and invitation at once. The silence between them thickened. Claire tried to speak, to brush it off, but what left her mouth surprised even her. "Do you love me?" The question startled them both. It came out urgent, raw, nothing like the playful teasing they usually exchanged. Her hands trembled as she reached for the scarf, pulling it from her shoulders and looping it clumsily around his neck. She tugged the ends tight, tying it with more force than necessary. "If you do," she whispered, her voice not entirely her own. "Jump with me." Ethan stared at her. His lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes darted between her face and the lake, and then, slowly, as if a string had been tied around his chest, he leaned forward toward the water. Claire's stomach dropped. She gripped his arm, shaking her head. "Wait, no, I didn't mean..." But the word came again, booming now, echoing off the trees, vibrating in her ribs. "Jump." Ethan moved as though compelled, rising to his feet, stepping toward the edge. Claire clung to him, but her grip was weak. The scarf dangled like a tether between them, the red wool catching moonlight as if soaked in something darker. "Ethan, stop," she cried. He turned his head slightly, eyes wide, distant. "It wants us." Then, before she could stop him, he leapt. The splash shattered the lake's perfect stillness. Water surged upward, silver under the moon. Claire screamed, stumbling back from the edge. And then, a second voice, not from the water this time, but from behind her, sharp, incredulous, human. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" Claire spun. A woman stood on the path, her hair damp, her clothes clinging as if she had just pulled herself from the water. Her face was pale, her expression horrified. She shouted again, voice cracking. "Ethan!" Claire turned back to the lake. Ethan's head broke the surface, sputtering, coughing. He spun toward the sound of the woman's voice. Confusion etched across his features. And in that moment, Claire looked down. The water no longer showed her reflection. Instead, it showed a figure dark, elongated, moving with a predator's grace. It was swimming just beneath Ethan, keeping pace with every desperate stroke. Its arms stretched long, its faceless head tilting upward. It was chasing him. Her scream caught in her throat. She wanted to run, to throw herself in, to drag him back. But the water rippled, and the figure's body seemed to dissolve into the black, waiting for its moment. Behind her, the woman kept shouting. Ahead, Ethan flailed, fighting to reach the shore. And beneath, the lake whispered once more. Soft, certain, "You belong to me." Ethan didn't speak on the drive back. His wet clothes clung to the car seat, leaving dark patches that smelled faintly of algae and iron. The scarf, still looped around his neck, hung heavy and sodden. Claire kept glancing at it, half expecting it to drip onto the floor mats, though it didn't. The wool looked dry now, impossibly so, as if the lake had claimed all the moisture for itself. She gripped the steering wheel too tightly. The road wound through pine and oak, headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. Neither of them reached for the radio. Every so often, she thought she heard something writing the hum of the tires a syllable, almost like her name. Claire. She pressed harder on the gas pedal. When they finally reached Ethan's apartment, she all but dragged him inside. He didn't resist. He moved like someone half asleep, body present but mind lagging behind. She set him on the couch, fetched towels, filled a mug with steaming tea. He took the mug but didn't drink, staring blankly at the floor. "Ethan," she said softly, "talk to me, please." His eyes flicked up to hers, glassy. "It was under me." Her stomach nodded. "What was?" "The thing," he whispered, "in the water. I felt it move. I thought it was pulling me down. But when I looked, it wasn't a hand. It was me, or something that looked like me." Claire sat back, heart hammering. She had seen it too. She had seen the stretched arms, the faceless oval tilting up. She hadn't told him, but now she didn't need to. She opened her mouth to answer, then froze. The scarf. It lay across his shoulders, red wool glowing faintly in the lamplight, and on it damp stains had spread, though she hadn't noticed before. Dark streaks, almost black, running along the weave. They looked like fingerprints. long, smudged prints that wrapped around the fabric as though someone had gripped it hard with wet hands. "Ethan," she whispered, "take it off." He glanced down, as though surprised it was still there. He tugged at the knot loosely, but the fabric clung. His brows furrowed. He pulled harder. The scarf didn't move. Claire leaned forward, fumbling with the knot. Her nails scraped against the wool. It felt slick, almost alive, as though the fibers tightened under her touch. She yanked with both hands. Nothing. A faint sound escaped the scarf. Not fabric tearing. A whisper. "Jump." Claire gasped and stumbled back. Ethan's eyes widened. He gripped the scarf again, frantic, tugging until his neck reddened. Finally, with a sharp snap, the knot loosened. The scarf dropped onto the couch, limp and harmless. They both stared at it, breathing hard. Neither reached to pick it up. That night, Claire dreamed of water. Not drowning exactly, but sinking. Black water cradling her gently, rocking her like a child. A face hovered above hers, her own, smiling faintly, whispering her name through a mouth that didn't move. When she woke, the scarf was on her chest. She screamed, flinging it across the room. Ethan jolted awake beside her, eyes wide. The scarf landed against the far wall with a wet slap, though it had been dry hours before. A dark stain spread on the plaster, shaped like an open hand. They left the light on after that. Neither slept. The next morning, Ethan tried to rationalize. We were tired. We imagined it. People drown in lakes all the time, and our brains filled in the rest. Claire didn't argue. She didn't trust her voice not to crack. She just watched as he lifted the scarf carefully, holding it away from his body, and dropped it into the kitchen trash. The lid shut with a thud. But that evening, when Claire opened the closet to grab her coat, the scarf was hanging from the hook inside dry, neat, folded like it had been waiting. Her scream brought Ethan running. When he saw it, color drained from his face. He grabbed the scarf, stormed outside, and threw it into the dumpster across the lot. He stood for a long time staring into the bin, as though daring it to climb back out. Back inside, he locked the door and slid the chain across. "It won't follow us here," he muttered. Claire almost believed him. Almost. Until the whisper returned. It came from the heating vent, from the bathroom faucet, from the hollow of the apartment walls. Soft, coaxing, her name stretched into a sigh. "Claire, come back." She pressed her hands to her ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't in the air, it was in her blood. The next night, Ethan heard it too. He was pouring water into a glass when his hand froze mid-motion. His head tilted, eyes unfocused. "Did you hear that?" Claire's stomach dropped. "What?" It said my name. They stared at each other in silence. The faucet dripped once, twice, then, faintly from the drain, the whisper rose again. "Ethan." The glass shattered on the floor. From that night on, the apartment grew damp. Not visibly at first, just the smell. A faint must of mildew, a tang of algae, as though the lake had soaked into the walls. Then came the stains, small watermarks blooming on the ceiling, a puddle forming beneath the radiator. Ethan called the landlord. The pipes were fine. Claire lay awake listening to the drip, drip, drip of phantom water. Sometimes she thought she heard footsteps waiting just beyond the bedroom door. And always, threaded through, was the voice. Sometimes a whisper, sometimes a chant, sometimes tender, as though coaxing a lover, sometimes sharp, like a command barked in her ear. "Jump. Come back. Both of you." One evening, Ethan returned from work, pale and shaking. "It followed me," he said. Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. "I was crossing the street by the park, and I heard it louder than ever. I thought it was just me. But then," he broke off, hands trembling. "A woman next to me stopped too. She looked at me like she'd heard the same thing. Then she stepped into traffic. Just like that. Didn't even look." Claire pressed her hands to her mouth. "Oh my God." "Oh, she didn't survive," he whispered. But Claire, before the car hit her, she was smiling, like she'd found what she was waiting for. Silence thickened between them. Neither dared say what they both thought. The lake wasn't just calling them anymore. It was spreading. That night, as Claire stood at the window, she caught sight of the dumpster across the lot. The scarf was draped over the edge, red wool glowing faintly under the sodium streetlight, and for the first time it was not lying still. It was moving, the ends lifted slightly, swaying though no wind stirred, like a hand beckoning, like a wave goodbye. Claire stumbled back from the glass, whispering to herself, "It wants us. It's not going to stop." And, behind her, Ethan's voice came quietly, cracked with dread. "Maybe it already has us." The following week, Claire stopped trusting crowds. Voices carried too easily in them, voices that didn't belong to mouths. It began in the grocery store. She was standing by the freezer aisle, staring blankly at bags of frozen peas, when the hum of the refrigeration unit shifted. At first, she thought it was feedback, mechanical, but then the syllables formed, unmistakable. "Claire, jump." She dropped the bag in her hands. Peas scattered across the floor. A man nearby glanced at her, startled, and then froze. His expression emptied out. He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something far away. "Did you hear?" Claire started, but the words lodged in her throat, because the man repeated it, softly, as if the whisper had passed through him. "Jump." His eyes unfocused. He stepped forward, straight into the freezer door, forehead striking glass with a dull thud. Claire gasped and grabbed his arm, shaking him back into himself. He blinked, confused, rubbed the red mark on his skin, and muttered an apology. He didn't remember, but she remembered, and she knew. The lake's voice had learned how to borrow other throats. That night, Ethan returned pale, clutching his phone like it was evidence. "You need to see this." He held up the screen. A local news clip played reporter breathless, words tumbling. Witnesses say the woman walked calmly into the water. No struggle, no cry for help. She smiled before disappearing under the surface. The footage cut to shaky cell phone video. The Black Lake shoreline. Emergency lights flashing red against the dark water. A stretcher wheeled past, draped in plastic. In the background, the water gleamed perfectly still, as if nothing had happened. Claire turned away, bile rising in her throat. "It's spreading," she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He was staring out the window, as though expecting to see the lake shimmering on the street below. They stopped sleeping. Not for lack of trying. Exhaustion gnawed at them constantly, but every time their eyes shut, the voice found a new way in. It slipped into their dreams, made them jolt awake with phantom water filling their lungs. It hummed through the radiator, crackled in the light bulbs, even used the rhythm of the neighbor's footsteps above. "Jump. Come back. Both of you." One night, Claire bolted upright, heart hammering. The whisper had been so close, pressed right against her ear. She looked at Ethan. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, face pale in the dim light. "It's louder," he said flatly. "I don't think it cares if anyone else hears it now." The next evening, they tried to fight back. Ethan drove them to the far side of town, to a diner bright with neon and chatter. They slid into a booth, ordered greasy food they didn't touch, and sat beneath the clamor of voices and clinking cutlery. Claire thought maybe, just maybe, the noise would drown it out. But then, from the jukebox in the corner, beneath the croon of an old love song, the harmony warped. Words bled through the melody, distinct, taunting. "Claire, Ethan, jump." Claire's fork clattered onto the table. Ethan's face drained of color. Across the diner, a child repeated it in a sing-song voice, giggling as if it were a nursery rhyme. His mother scolded him, but the boy only smiled too wide, too knowing. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand. "We have to leave." They drove without destination, headlights cutting through endless woods. "Where does it end?" Claire demanded. Her voice cracked, rising with panic. "If it follows us everywhere, if it talks through anyone, what's left?" Ethan gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. There has to be a way. There has to. But neither of them believed it. The figure began to show itself outside the lake. It started with reflections. In the bathroom mirror, Claire saw her own face, but smiling when she wasn't. In the microwave door, Ethan's eyes stared too long, blinking out of sync with his real ones. Then came glass. Passing a storefront at night, Claire caught a glimpse in the window. Her reflection turned toward Ethan, lips moving, whispering something she hadn't said. She froze. Ethan looked too. And there, just for a heartbeat, both their reflections raised their hands in unison, not matching their real bodies but beckoning toward the glass. They ran from the window like children fleeing monsters, but they knew the truth. The figures weren't trapped in water anymore. They had found other surfaces, other ways to watch. By the end of the week, the town was whispering too. At the gas station, two strangers argued, then abruptly fell silent, heads cocked to the same unheard rhythm. At the library, the hum of fluorescent lights shaped itself into syllables, making people twitch and glance nervously at each other. And always, the lake waited. Claire and Ethan avoided it, but its presence seeped into every corner of their lives. When they closed their eyes, they saw the shoreline. When they opened them, they saw hints of water where none should be, puddles forming indoors, damp stains blooming on wood, droplets sliding down glass with no source. The scarf returned, again and again, draped across furniture, looped around doorknobs, once even tied around Claire's pillow while she slept. No matter how many times they burned it, cut it, drowned it, the scarf came back whole, and each time, darker. The wool now shimmered faintly, as though woven with strands of water itself. One night, in a moment of desperate courage, Ethan said, "We have to go back. Face it." Claire stared at him. "Go back? To the lake?" He nodded, jaw tight. "It's not letting us go. Maybe it wants something. Maybe if we give it..." "No," she snapped, panic rising like bile. "That's what it wants. It doesn't give back. It takes." But even as she said it, the scarf twitched on the table between them. Just a flicker, as though nodding in agreement with him, not her. The following night, they heard the town move. It was subtle at first, neighbors leaving their apartments at odd hours, footsteps echoing in stairwells, doors clicking shut one after another. Claire peered through the blinds and saw dozens of people walking in the same direction, their faces slack, eyes vacant, toward the lake. Her breath caught. She grabbed Ethan's hand. "It's calling everyone." They joined the stream, helpless against the tide of bodies. Men, women, children, all drifting silently toward the black water. The town emptied itself like a ritual, drawn by the same steady command. When they reached the shore, the scene froze Claire's blood. The lake was alive. The surface seethed with shadow figures. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each one shaped like someone standing on the bank. Mirror images, faceless but recognizably human, gliding just beneath the water's skin. The crowd stared down at their own doubles. And then, as one, the voice rose. "Come back." The crowd stepped forward. Claire clutched Ethan's arm, desperate. The scarf whipped around her throat again, choking, pulling her toward the edge. She gasped, clawing at it. Ethan tore at the fabric, but the wool burned his hands, sizzling against skin. Around them, splash after splash rang out as people entered the water. Some waded calmly, others toppled headlong. Reflections rose to meet them, merging, dragging them under. Claire's knees buckled. The scarf yanked harder. She felt the command throb in her veins, heavier than thought. Ethan's face loomed above hers, wild with terror. "Don't let it win," he begged. "Claire, look at me." She tried, but over his shoulder she saw it. Her reflection in the lake, clearer than ever. It was smiling, its arms stretched open, waiting. And this time, the voice didn't whisper. It roared, not just inside her, but through every throat on the shore. Hundreds of voices speaking in unison. "Jump." The night was breaking apart. Claire couldn't tell if the sounds around her belonged to people or to the lake itself. Screams rose and fell like waves. Splashes cracked the air, again and again, each one swallowed almost instantly by the dark surface. The crowd had become a river, flowing forward, spilling into the water without resistance. Some went willingly. Their steps were calm, their faces serene, like pilgrims stepping into a promised land. Others thrashed and clawed at the railings, but their bodies betrayed them, feet marching forward despite their hands' desperate grip. And each time a body met the water, a shadow double surged up to meet it. The reflections were grotesque in their familiarity. A child's outline with limbs too long, a man's face stretched into a grin too wide, a woman's body twisting with boneless grace. They rose, embraced their human counterparts, and dragged them under. Claire clung to Ethan. Her throat burned, the red scarf coiled like a serpent around her neck, tugging her forward. She clawed at it, fingers raw, but it only tightened, hot as iron. "Ethan," she gasped. "It's pulling me." He wrapped his arms around her, bracing against the surge of bodies. "I won't let go," he shouted. His voice was hoarse, but his grip was iron. The chant thundered across the shore. not whispered anymore, but bellowed, layered in hundreds of voices, some human, some not. Jump, jump, come back. The sound rattled Claire's ribs. It wasn't just heard, it was felt, thrumming through marrow, vibrating teeth, shaking vision. The whole world seemed tuned to the lake's command. The black lake itself began to change. Its surface wasn't flat anymore. It rippled outward in concentric rings, opening wider and wider, as though the water itself were pulling back to reveal something beneath. Claire's stomach lurched. The lake was not a lake. It was an eye. And now it was opening. In the widening gap, shadows writhed like eels. They surged upward in columns, forming vague humanoid shapes that broke and reformed. 1,000 faceless heads tilted toward the crowd. And then impossibly they began to climb. The surface did not break them. They slid up onto the shore, dripping black water that steamed where it hit the ground. Their bodies glistened with something thicker than water, limbs bending at wrong angles, movements twitching and insect-like. Yet their forms bore eerie resemblance to the people they reached for. Claire's breath hitched. One of them looked like her. It wasn't perfect, its jaw stretched too far, its eyes wide, its grin fixed, but the outline was hers. Its arms reached out with a tenderness that made her gag. She staggered back against Ethan, but the scarf jerked her forward again like a leash connecting her to that thing. No, Ethan roared. He seized the scarf, wrapping it around his fists, and yanked. The wool burned him, but he didn't care. The knot resisted, pulsing like a vein, until finally it loosened. The scarf dropped between them, steaming. For a moment, Claire could breathe. She collapsed against him, sobbing, but then the scarf writhed on the ground, slithering like something alive, and flung itself into the water. The reflection thing that looked like Claire caught it in both hands and draped it around its neck. The sight was worse than suffocation. It was as though the lake itself had decided it could wear her now, whether she consented or not. The crowd's chaos turned into frenzy. People screamed as shadows pulled them under. Some disappeared in seconds. Others struggled, their bodies thrashing on the surface while their reflections dragged at them with impossible strength. Claire's ears rang with the sound of water closing over lungs, the gurgle of final breaths. Ethan pulled her back, stumbling through the panicked mass. "We have to get out," he rasped. "We have to leave." But every path was clogged with bodies. The shore was a tide of human forms pressing forward, spilling into the lake. And the lake wanted them all. Claire clutched Ethan's sleeve. Her voice was a whisper, almost drowned by the roar. "What if it doesn't let us leave?" He looked at her, and for a heartbeat, she saw doubt flicker in his eyes. The voice thundered again, shaking the trees, rattling the earth. "If you love him, if you love her, prove it. Jump together." Claire's legs buckled. Her chest ached as though the command had weight, crushing her ribs. She stumbled forward, caught herself, stumbled again. Ethan grabbed her, but she felt him falter too. His hands trembled, his body leaning slightly toward the water. His lips moved, forming words she prayed she hadn't heard. Maybe it's the only way. "No," she cried, slapping him hard across the face. His head snapped to the side, eyes clearing for a heartbeat. He gritted his teeth, shook himself, and dragged her back against his chest. But the command returned, heavier, deeper, now laced with tenderness. "Together, forever, come back." The lake surged. The shadows rose taller, towering over the bank. Their mouths opened wide, and for the first time they screamed not words, but a sound like metal tearing underwater, high and low at once. The crowd collapsed into hysteria. Some fled, tripping over bodies. Others hurled themselves willingly into the black, laughing as they vanished. Claire and Ethan were trapped at the center of it, hemmed in by surging figures both human and inhuman. The air stank of brine and rot, heavy with the reek of drowned things. The reflection Claire stepped forward, dripping scarf, gleaming red in the moonlight. Its hand reached out, palm up, inviting. Ethan's double was there too, now broad-shouldered, jaw slack, eyes bottomless. It tilted its head, mirroring Ethan's movements with uncanny precision. Its hand reached for him, trembling with eagerness. The scarf between them pulsed once, as though bridging both doubles, binding them. Claire sobbed, clutching Ethan. "It won't stop," she whispered. "It won't ever stop." He held her tight. His face was pale, wet with sweat, streaked with lake water, though he hadn't touched it. His voice was raw, but steady. Then we decide how it ends. The crowd surged again, voices merging into a single chant. Jump, jump, jump. The shoreline shook, as if the earth itself had joined. Claire and Ethan clung to each other, bodies pressed together, the pull of the lake dragging at their very bones. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world had narrowed to a single question: resist and be torn apart, or leap and be swallowed whole. The black lake opened wider, its mouth yawning in the moonlight. And the reflection, Claire, and reflection, Ethan waited, arms spread, smiling with faces that were almost theirs. The world dissolved into water. Claire couldn't hear her own screams anymore, only the lake's thunderous voice, rattling the bones of everyone left on the shore. The crowd pressed forward in waves, bodies spilling into the black, shadows rising to meet them. The earth smelled of rot and brine, the air humming with electricity. Ethan's grip was the only anchor left. His arms locked around her waist as if clinging to a ledge above an abyss. She buried her face in his chest, but the sound seeped through him, vibrating into her skull. Together, forever, jump. The reflection stepped closer. Her own double, with its crooked smile and her red scarf dripping down its chest, reached out as though it were inevitable. Ethan's double mirrored him, perfectly tilting its head in the same rhythm, raising its hands with a hunger that wasn't human. Claire squeezed her eyes shut. Don't look, don't answer. But then Ethan spoke, voice low and cracked. Claire, what if this is all we are now? What if the only way to stop it? Don't you dare, she snapped, cutting him off. Her nails dug into his arm. Don't you give it what it wants. He trembled. She felt the war in him, the pull of the water, the command threading into his blood. His muscles strained as if every fiber fought against itself. His face pressed against hers, hot with fever. I don't know how much longer I can hold, he whispered. The ground shook. Claire's knees gave out. They fell together, landing hard on wet gravel. The lake surged higher, water lapping at their shoes. The crowd was thinning now, not because people had stopped, but because so many had already gone under. The chanting dulled, not weaker, just closer. It came from beneath, hundreds of mouths whispering from the lake's depths, voices layered in one long, endless moan. Claire dared one glance toward the water. She wished she hadn't. The lake's surface had split wide, a dark chasm yawning like a mouth. Inside, she saw shapes writhing, arms tangled, faces pressing against each other, mouths gasping for air that didn't exist. Some of them she recognized: the man from the grocery store, the woman from the news video, even the boy who had sung the word jump in the diner. Their faces stared up at her, eyes wide, silently begging. And behind them, deeper still, something vast moved, bigger than any reflection, bigger than the crowd itself. The lake's true shape, rising, waiting. Claire choked on bile. She turned away, burying her face against Ethan's shoulder. We have to get out. Now. He nodded, but his hands shook as he helped her up. Together they shoved through the remaining crowd, forcing themselves against the current of bodies still drifting toward the shore. Someone grabbed Claire's sleeve, muttering nonsense, eyes glazed. She tore free, heart racing. Step by step, they clawed their way back through the trees, the voice chasing them, softer now but no less insistent. Come back, come back. Branches whipped their faces, mud clung to their shoes. The chanting dulled with distance, but never disappeared. Even when they broke through to the road, even when they staggered into the empty town, it followed. They didn't speak as they drove. The streets were deserted, every shop front dark, every porch light extinguished. It felt like the whole town had gone silent, emptied of life. Ethan's knuckles whitened around the wheel. Claire stared out the window, watching the blur of trees. Her ears still rang with whispers. At one point, she thought she saw headlights approaching from the opposite lane. Relief surged: someone else alive, someone else awake. But as the car drew nearer, her blood ran cold. Through the windshield, she glimpsed the driver. It was her. Not exactly. Her hair was wrong. Her mouth stretched too wide. Her eyes bottomless, but it was enough. The car passed, vanished into darkness, leaving only the echo of a grin burned into her mind. She pressed her hands to her face and wept. They didn't stop until sunrise. By then they had driven miles away, into farmland where fog hung low over the fields. Ethan pulled over beside an abandoned barn. The two of them stumbled out, collapsed onto the grass. The air here was fresh, clean. Birds called faintly in the distance. For the first time in days, silence. Claire lay on her back, chest heaving, watching the sky pale. The horizon bled pink and gold. She wanted to believe it was over. She wanted to believe distance mattered. But when she closed her eyes, she felt the scarf against her skin again, the phantom weight, the faint pulse, beating in rhythm with her own. And when she opened her eyes, dew glittered on the grass around them. Not ordinary dewdrops too dark, too thick, drops that smelled faintly of algae. The lake was here too. Weeks passed. They didn't go back to the town, didn't talk about it to anyone. When people asked where they had been, they lied, said they'd been traveling, said they'd been busy. No one mentioned the disappearances at the lake. No news covered it, as though it had been erased. But Claire knew better. She heard it in the quiet moments, in the hum of refrigerators, in the rattle of pipes, in the sigh of wind across glass. She saw it too, in mirrors, in puddles, in Ethan's eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. Once, while brushing her teeth, she spat into the sink and froze. The water circling the drain wasn't clear. It was black. Ethan grew quieter. He carried exhaustion like a second skin, eyes hollow, voice flat. Some nights she woke to find him standing at the window, staring out, lips moving silently. She never asked what he was whispering. She already knew. The last time they tried to talk about it, they sat together on the porch of a borrowed house. Twilight sinking. Claire's voice shook. It marked us, didn't it? Ethan didn't look at her. He watched the horizon, jaw tight. After a long silence, he nodded. Her throat tightened. Then what do we do? He closed his eyes. For a moment, he looked like a man already halfway gone. When he opened them, she saw it. Not in his face exactly, but in the reflection in the window behind him. His double was there, faint, grinning, pressing its palm to the glass, and behind it, hers. That night, as she drifted into uneasy sleep, the voice returned soft, patient, inevitable. You ran. You hid. But you belong to me. The words brushed her skin like the lap of a tide, gentle, persistent. She opened her eyes to darkness, heart thundering. Ethan lay beside her, breathing steadily. But when she turned toward him, she saw the scarf again, around his throat this time, knotted tight, pulsing faintly in the dark. Her hand shot out instinctively, ready to rip it away, only to find the same fabric coiled around her own neck. She didn't remember putting it on. Her lungs seized. Her hands clawed, but the scarf did not yield, and beneath the sound of her strangled breath, the lake whispered one last time, "You never left." Story 3, The Light of the Phantom Bus. Fog isn't rare in December, but on that night, the mist had weight. It curled around the highway in thick ribbons, swallowing the lamps until they glowed like dying candles. Tires whispered over wet asphalt. The world beyond 20 feet simply didn't exist. Emily sat high behind the wheel of her bus, hands stiff on the steering column. The heater rattled uselessly, doing little to fight the damp that clung to her bones. Midnight routes always unsettled her, but this one, cutting through the hills outside town, felt different. Too empty, too quiet. The passengers had already disembarked at the last stop. Now it was just her, a tank half full of gas, and 30 miles of road winding back to the depot. She should have felt relief alone meant safe, predictable, but the silence inside the cabin pressed against her ears, almost louder than a crowd. She adjusted the rear view. All it showed was mist, a gray wall swallowing her taillights. That was when she heard it. A horn, not sharp, not the ordinary bleat of a car on the interstate. This was deeper, metallic, like a foghorn torn from the throat of something older. It reverberated through the fog, into her chest cavity, rattling her ribs. Emily's foot twitched on the accelerator. She scanned the mirrors again, leaning forward until her forehead nearly touched the glass. Nothing. Just the roil of mist, glowing faintly orange from the highway lights. Her knuckles whitened on the wheel. She forced herself to breathe. "It's another bus," she whispered to herself. "Somebody on a night shift like me." But then the glow appeared. Far back, through the fog, two beams of light cut the gray, too high off the ground to be a car. They wavered slightly, as if the vehicle listing side to side. Headlights. Emily's shoulders eased for a second, but only a second. Because the beams drew closer faster than they should have. eating the distance without sound, no rumble of an engine, no hiss of tires, just the light. She shifted lanes. The lights followed. Her pulse quickened. She pressed the accelerator, the engine grumbling, speedometer inching up. For a moment, the fog thinned enough for her to glimpse the shape behind her. It was another bus, or what had once been a bus. Its windows were shattered, jagged teeth glinting in the headlights. The paint was stripped by rust, leaving only streaks of corroded metal. One tire wobbled violently as it spun, yet the vehicle didn't slow. Its front grille was twisted, bent inward like a jaw, and behind the cracked windshield, no driver. Emily's throat tightened. She blinked hard, thinking exhaustion was playing tricks. But when her eyes opened again, the bus was closer, so close she could make out the shadows inside. Shapes slumped in the seats, dozens of them, passengers, dead-eyed, motionless, and one figure standing at the very front, a woman, pale, rigid. Her hair hung in wet strands. Her face was gray, waterlogged, like she'd been pulled from a river. Her eyes were nothing but white, and those eyes were fixed on Emily. She wrenched the wheel. Her bus swerved, tires screeching, body tilting dangerously before it righted itself. The road stretched ahead in a black ribbon, fog eating the edges. Emily risked another glance in the mirror. The phantom bus hadn't swerved. It had followed, perfectly. The horn blared again, louder this time. The windows of Emily's bus rattled in their frames. She pressed the accelerator harder. The engine groaned. 50 miles an hour. 55. The wipers squealed against the damp glass, though the fog was too thick to cut. Go, she muttered. Just go. The lights behind her flared brighter, burning through the mist. Her shadow stretched across the road ahead, huge and distorted, as if something else were driving with her. Her palms were slick with sweat. She tried the radio static only. No dispatcher, no signal, just the hiss of white noise, and beneath it, almost too soft to notice, a whisper. Her name, Emily. She slammed the radio off. The road bent sharply around a hill. She took the turn hard, praying the other bus would miss it, skid out, vanish into the ravine. But when she straightened the wheel, the headlights were still there. Closer, the woman with the white eyes hadn't moved. Still staring, Emily's breath came in gasps. She could taste metal on her tongue. This isn't real, she told herself. I'm tired. I'm dreaming with my eyes open. But the horn blared again, so loud her ears rang. The phantom bus surged forward, its twisted grille nearly kissing her rear bumper. The air filled with the stench of burned rubber and rot. Emily's vision blurred with tears. She tightened her grip on the wheel. The road was narrowing. She knew what was coming. The bridge. One lane only. Iron railings eaten by rust. If the bus behind touched her, if it forced her, she shook her head violently. Focus. Just get across. The fog swallowed the world as she barreled forward. The headlights behind her swelled, drowning everything else. And through the roar of her own engine, through the scream of the phantom horn, Emily heard the woman's voice for the first time. Not through the radio, not through the fog. Directly, a whisper pressed into her skull. You won't outrun me. The bridge appeared out of the fog like a rusted jawbone. Iron railings stretched along either side, jagged with decay, paint peeled to bare orange-brown. The asphalt narrowed into a single lane, the surface patched with uneven slabs that looked slick as ice. Beneath it, though she couldn't see through the mist, Emily knew the river ran wide and fast, swollen by winter melt. There was no turning back. Her headlights carved a narrow corridor through the fog, illuminating only what was directly ahead. The rest was swallowed whole. She swallowed hard, knuckles blanching on the wheel. Behind her, the horn bellowed again, louder, closer. The sound shook her chest cavity, made her ribs ache. The rearview mirror bloomed with white light, the twin beams swelling until they drowned out everything else. Emily pressed harder on the accelerator. The bus rumbled onto the bridge, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The structure groaned beneath the weight, a metallic moan that vibrated up through the steering wheel. The phantom bus followed. The fog seemed to condense around it, wrapping it in a shroud. Its headlights pulsed brighter, unnatural, almost biological, like eyes widening. Emily glanced in the mirror and saw it framed in perfect symmetry. Her bus on the bridge, and behind it the ruined twin, bearing down like a predator in pursuit. And there, at its helm, the woman, no longer a vague shape. Her face pressed against the cracked windshield, skin bloated and pale, lips split and blue. Her eyes were pure white, shining like marbles in the glow. And they were fixed on Emily, unwavering. Emily's stomach lurched. She forced her gaze forward. Focus. Don't look back. Don't look at her. But the voice came anyway. Not through the radio, not through the horn. Directly into her skull. Faster. Emily obeyed without meaning to, foot slamming the accelerator. The bus roared, engine whining. The bridge blurred beneath her tires. Metal beams flashed past, each one a skeletal rib in the fog. She risked a glance at the speedometer. 60. The old bus rattled dangerously, each bump threatening to throw her off course. If she lost control here, there would be no second chance. The railings were too weak, the river too strong. The horn blared again. The phantom bus surged closer, grill nearly kissing her bumper. Its headlights filled the cabin, bleaching her hands white where they gripped the wheel. Shadows danced across the dashboard, and in the reflection on the windshield, she saw her. The woman with white eyes was no longer behind her. She was beside her, in the glass, standing where Emily's own reflection should have been. Emily's breath caught. She blinked, and the woman's face leaned closer to hers, pressing against the other side of the glass, lips parting. "You won't leave this bridge alive," Emily screamed. She yanked the wheel, the bus swerving dangerously. Tires skidded against slick asphalt. The whole structure trembled. For a moment she thought she'd lost it, that the bus would careen into the railing and shatter into the river. But somehow the tires caught. The bus straightened, head chest heaved, lungs burning. She dared another glance in the mirror. The phantom bus was still there, closer than ever. But now, impossibly, its interior was lit, flickering, like lanterns or dying bulbs, and she could see them clearly, the passengers. Dozens of pale figures slumped in their seats, heads lolled, mouths slightly open. Their eyes were white too, empty, and one by one they began to lift their heads. Emily's heart seized. She felt the weight of all those eyes fixing on her, even from behind shattered glass. The horn blared again. This time it was not a single note. It was layered, dozens of voices screaming in unison. Her ears rang. The wheel shook in her grip. She wanted to let go, to cover her ears, but she couldn't. She could only drive. Faster, the voice whispered again. The bridge stretched on impossibly long. It should have been a mile at most, but the fog distorted distance, each span repeating itself like a nightmare loop. She passed beam after beam, each identical, each groaning as though under strain. Her arms ached. Her throat was raw from breathing too fast, and still the lights pressed closer. At the halfway point, or what felt like it, Emily noticed something that made her blood turn cold. The road wasn't just wet. It was slick with something darker. Patches of it gleamed under her headlights, thick and black. For a wild second she thought it was oil. Then she saw the color properly. Water, but not clear water, not rain or river spray. This was black as tar, clinging to the asphalt, pooling in wide streaks that rippled as though alive. The bus rolled through it, tires hissing. The steering wheel jerked, slippery, fighting her control. And then she heard them, hands, slapping against the underside of the bus, fingers dragging along the metal, nails screeching, as though something below the bridge was climbing, crawling, searching for a way in. Her vision tunneled. She clenched the wheel, teeth bared, every muscle straining. The horn blared again, rattling her bones. The phantom bus was almost upon her now. She could see the cracks in its windshield, the rust eating its sides, the white-eyed woman pressing harder against the glass, her lips curling into a smile. Emily's whole body trembled. She screamed at herself, screamed at the bus, screamed at the night. "No, you're not taking me." The headlights ahead broke the fog and exit. The far end of the bridge. Her chest swelled with frantic hope. She pressed the accelerator to the floor, the engine howling in protest. The tires screamed, water spraying up from beneath. Behind her, the phantom bus surged. Its horn roared so loud it became a physical force, shoving at her back. The windshield glass shivered, hairline cracks spidering outward. The white-eyed woman leaned closer, so close Emily could see the texture of her skin, bloated, waterlogged, lips split with cold. Her breath fogged the inside of the glass. Almost there, the voice hissed. Emily's body was fire and ice. She forced her gaze forward, toward the faint glow of the exit. Just a few more seconds. Just hold the wheel. The bridge trembled beneath both buses, metal shrieking, rivets groaning. The sound was deafening, apocalyptic. And then, with one final, bone-rattling blast of its horn, the phantom bus rammed her rear bumper. Emily's body slammed into the wheel. Her teeth clacked together. The bus fishtailed, tires squealing across slick asphalt. She fought to correct, muscles screaming, eyes fixed on the exit just feet away. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she thought she'd made it. But then she looked in the mirror. The white-eyed woman wasn't behind her anymore. She was in the aisle, standing at the back of Emily's bus, staring directly at her. Emily's heart stuttered. The rearview mirror trembled with her breath, but the figure in it was steady. She was there. The woman with white eyes stood at the far end of the aisle, between the last row of seats. Her hair dripped in long, matted strands, soaking the grimy fabric. Her skin sagged, swollen and gray, as though she'd been submerged for days. The soaked hem of her dress left dark streaks across the floor, and those eyes, white, vacant, were locked on Emily. Emily tore her gaze from the mirror. "No," she whispered, shaking her head violently. "No, no, no." She whipped around in the seat, craning to see the aisle directly. Empty. The rows of seats stretched back into foggy shadow, untouched. Her chest heaved. She turned back, clutching the wheel. The road beyond the bridge wound into black forest, headlights cutting a thin ribbon. But when her eyes flicked up again, the mirror showed her still there. Closer now, halfway down the aisle. Emily's breath hitched. She slammed the rear view upward until it faced the ceiling. Out of sight, out of mind. Just the road, just her. But the sound came anyway. Wet footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Slap, drag, slap. Her throat closed. She pressed the accelerator harder, as if speed could dissolve the sound. The engine roared, but it couldn't drown the footsteps. They grew louder, nearer, deliberate as a heartbeat. Emily gripped the wheel so tightly her hands cramped. "Don't look," she hissed. "Don't look." She looked. In the glass of the side window, blurred by condensation, the reflection was clear. The woman stood just 2 rows back, head tilted, lips parting. The glass frosted white around her face as if she were breathing against it from the inside. Emily choked on a scream. She swerved, bus lurching dangerously across the lane. Horns blared from somewhere in the fog, real horns this time. Distant cars forced to swerve, but the phantom horn rose louder, drowning them all. Her eyes darted forward. For a moment, she thought she saw salvation. Headlights ahead, maybe a truck, maybe another bus. Something human, something real. But the lights flickered, then vanished, swallowed by the mist as if they'd never existed. The footsteps stopped. Emily's chest seized. Silence filled the cabin, heavier than any sound. Then, a hand gripped her shoulder. Cold, wet, strong. Emily shrieked, jerking violently. The bus veered, tires screaming. She slapped at the hand, only air. She was alone at the wheel. The cabin behind her, silent, empty, but her shoulder was soaked. Droplets slid down her arm, staining her sleeve. Her vision blurred with tears. She gasped, choking on breath. "Please," she whispered. "Please, leave me alone." The reply was instant. A voice, layered, whispering from every vent, every crack, every pane of glass. "You're already one of us." The dashboard lights flickered. The gauges spun wildly, speedometer jerking from 40 to 80 and back in seconds. Fuel needle swinging empty, full empty. Warning lights flared, chimed, then went dead. The bus itself seemed to falter, coughing, shuddering beneath her. Emily pounded the wheel. Not now. Not now. The headlights sputtered, blinked, then flared bright white. For an instant, the road ahead was lit clear, trees skeletal, fog swirling low. And in that light, she saw them, figures. Dozens lining the roadside. Men, women, children. Skin gray, eyes white, dripping water. Silent, watching. Their heads turned as one as she barreled past, their gaze snapping to follow her. She couldn't hear their footsteps, but she felt the weight of their eyes, dragging at her spine. Her stomach twisted. She pressed the accelerator to the floor. The cabin grew colder. Frost spread across the inside of the windshield, crawling in veins from the edges toward the center. Her breath fogged thick in front of her face. She shivered violently, teeth chattering, fingers stiff on the wheel. Something moved in the frost. Letters, etched by an invisible hand. Okay, Emily sobbed. She shook her head, squeezing her eyes shut. I won't. But when she opened them again, her eyes betrayed her. The mirror had tilted back down. The woman stood directly behind her now, so close Emily could feel her dripping hair brush the back of her seat. Her reflection in the glass was smiling. Emily's scream tore through the cabin. She wrenched the wheel, bus skidding across the road. Tires screamed, the whole frame juddering. For a moment she thought it would tip, but it righted itself, metal groaning in protest. The phantom horn blared again, shaking the cabin. The ruined bus loomed in her mirror once more, closer than physics should allow. Its grille yawned wide, headlights blazing, a second away from impact. And over its glow, the white-eyed woman leaned forward, her lips brushing Emily's ear, though her body stood behind her. Crash. Emily slammed the brakes. Tires shrieked, smoke billowed. The bus fishtailed violently. Her chest slammed the wheel, air blasting from her lungs. For a moment, silence. When she dared to open her eyes, the road ahead was empty. No lights, no figures, no fog, just black asphalt stretching on into forever. But in the aisle behind her, the wet footsteps began again. The footsteps quickened. Slap, drag, slap, drag. Each one closer, steady as a drumbeat counting down. Emily's throat was raw from screaming, but no sound came now. She gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles bloodless, shoulders locked tight, her eyes fixed forward on the endless road, though her whole body screamed to glance back, to confirm what she already knew. She wasn't alone in the bus anymore. Her breath fogged the glass in frantic bursts. The windshield was almost opaque with frost, letters bleeding through in crooked strokes. New words scrawled across the ice, each one appearing letter by letter. Let, hair, drive. Emily shook her head violently, slamming her fist against the wheel. No, you're not taking this. The bus juddered, shuddered like an animal in pain. The engine growled deep, then pitched into a shriek, gauges spasming wildly. The lights flickered, and in each flicker, Emily saw the woman sometimes at the back, sometimes 2 rows away, sometimes leaning over the driver's seat, her wet hair almost brushing Emily's cheek. Emily's stomach lurched. She wanted to leap from her own body, to crawl out of her own skin, but there was nowhere to go. She was the driver, the only driver. The horn blared behind her, so loud it rattled her bones. She dared a glance at the rearview mirror. The phantom bus was inches away. Its grille loomed massive, twisted into a snarl of rusted metal. Its headlights blazed like suns, swallowing the cabin in harsh white light, and through the cracks in its windshield, she saw the passengers, every face tilted up, eyes glowing white, mouths moving in unison, though no sound escaped. Except one, the woman at the front. Her mouth opened, wide, impossibly wide, teeth black, tongue swollen. The whisper slithered out, bypassing the roar of the horn. Crash. The impact came like a fist to the spine. The phantom bus rammed into her, metal on metal, the sound splitting the night. Emily's body snapped forward, ribs slamming the wheel. Her vision burst white, stars exploding behind her eyes. The bus skidded sideways, tires screaming, sparks spitting where the chassis scraped asphalt. She fought the wheel, screaming wordlessly. The fog outside fractured in the headlights, but there was no landscape beyond, no trees, no signs, no river. Only an endless gray void stretching forever. And in that void, the phantom bus shoved her forward, relentless, grinding her bus against invisible walls, crushing her into its path. The aisle behind her erupted with sound, feet pounding, dozens of them now. She risked a glance. Every seat was full. Her bus, empty minutes ago, was now crammed with passengers. Their clothes dripped river water. Their skin was gray and swollen, eyes blank, glowing. They sat slumped, yet their heads turned in perfect unison to face her. And at the very front, standing in the stairwell just behind her seat, was the woman. She leaned close, water dripping onto the console, lips brushing Emily's ear. "You can't stop it." Emily screamed. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, though the pedal was already pressed flat. The bus roared louder, shaking apart. She jerked the wheel, swerving wildly, hoping, praying the phantom bus would miss, would crash itself into nothing. But no matter how she turned, the headlights followed. The phantom bus mirrored her perfectly, glued to her rear bumper. Pushing, pushing. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. A side mirror snapped off and spun into the fog. The aisle lights flickered. Passengers blinked in and out of existence with each stutter. Sometimes there, sometimes gone. Sometimes only the wide-eyed woman, staring. The horn roared again, closer than ever. Emily tasted blood in her mouth, realized she'd bitten her tongue. Ahead, the road ended. A wall of fog parted just enough to reveal the drop. The bridge again, or maybe another one, broken in the middle. The asphalt simply stopped, leading into black nothing. Emily's stomach dropped. She stomped the brake. The pedals sank uselessly to the floor. No. The bus didn't slow. The woman laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound, like lungs filling with water. Her hand slid over Emily's on the wheel. Skin icy, nails sharp. Together they guided the bus forward, toward the drop. The phantom bus surged one final time, slamming into her with the force of a freight train. Emily screamed. Metal tore. Glass shattered. Her body snapped against the restraints, and the world tilted. For an instant, she saw it all, the two buses merging into one, her own reflection grinning in the windshield, passengers filling every seat, the wide-eyed woman's face pressed against hers. Then the void swallowed everything. Silence. Darkness. Emily's eyes fluttered open. Pain radiated through her ribs, her arm, her skull. She lay on something hard, the smell of antiseptic stinging her nostrils. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She was in a hospital bed. Machines hummed softly. An IV trailed into her arm. Her head was bandaged, gauze stiff with blood. She blinked, groggy, trying to focus. The nurse appeared at her side, voice calm, practiced. "You're awake. You're very lucky. A crash on Highway 6. No one thought you'd make it out." Emily swallowed, throat raw. Her lips moved, voice a rasp. "The bus," the nurse frowned. "Yes, you were driving. A single vehicle accident. The bus skidded out, hit the guardrail. It'll be a long recovery, but you're safe now." Emily's hand shot out, gripping the nurse's wrist. Her eyes wide, frantic. "No," she croaked. "Not mine. The other one. The bus that hit me. Where did it go?" The nurse's brow furrowed. "Other bus?" Emily's breath hitched. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. The lights. The horn. The woman. Where did it go? The nurse pulled gently from her grip, pity softening her expression. "You were alone, honey. Just you." Emily's body trembled. She sank back into the sheets, chest heaving. The nurse scribbled something on a chart, muttering about trauma, about disorientation. But Emily knew. She could still hear it, the faint echo of a horn, deep and metallic, reverberating through her bones. And when she closed her eyes, the darkness bloomed with headlights. Coming closer, the hospital smelled of bleach and something sweeter beneath, like wilted flowers left too long in a vase. Emily lay in her bed, every inch of her body heavy, her chest bound in gauze. She hadn't spoken since the nurse left, not really. She answered questions with nods, drank from paper cups, drifted in and out of sleep. But even when she slept, she wasn't free. The dreams were always the same, headlights swelling in the dark, horn blasts shaking her ribs, the pale woman's face pressed close to hers, whispering a single word. Crash. Emily would jolt awake, heart hammering, sweat beading her skin despite the chill. She'd tell herself it was just trauma, the brain replaying a wound that hadn't healed. But then she noticed things. The first was the sound. At night, when the hallway went quiet and machines hummed their lullabies, she heard it. A low drone, muffled at first, then clearer, like tires rolling endlessly on wet asphalt. The second was the light. It began as a faint glow bleeding beneath her door. Too bright for hallway bulbs, too focused. Twin beams, sliding slowly back and forth across the linoleum. Headlights. She told herself she was delirious. She pressed the call button, begged the nurse to check. But each time the nurse opened the door, the light was gone. leaving only the sterile corridor and her own shaking breath. One evening, a doctor visited, middle-aged, soft-spoken, his glasses fogging as he flipped through her chart. "You're healing well," he said gently. "With physical therapy, you'll be back on your feet in a month or two." Emily licked her lips, voice hoarse. "The other bus." The doctor glanced up. There wasn't another bus. There was. Her fingers clawed at the sheets. "It hit me. It pushed me. Where is it?" His face softened into pity, the same look the nurse had given her. "Trauma can invent things. The brain protects itself. You've been through something unimaginable. Sometimes the mind." He trailed off, closing the chart. "Focus on healing. The rest will settle." But Emily knew it hadn't been invention. The pain in her ribs was real. The waterlogged smell in her nose was real. And when she glanced past the doctor's shoulder, out the window into the parking lot below, she saw it. A rusted bus, parked crooked under the sodium lights. Its windows shattered, seats crowded with pale figures. And at the front, the white-eyed woman staring up at her window. Emily's throat closed. She blinked hard, and the lot was empty. When she opened her eyes again, the doctor was still talking, but she didn't hear him. Her pulse drowned everything. The days blurred. Nurses came and went. Doctors scribbled notes. Other patients groaned in nearby rooms. Emily stayed silent, conserving her voice, conserving her strength. But at night, the bus returned. She heard its horn echoing through the vents, rattling the thin walls. She smelled its exhaust, sharp and acrid, seeping into her sheets. Sometimes she saw its shadow move across the curtain, massive, lumbering, impossible in a fourth-floor ward. And always, just before dawn, she saw her. The woman, sometimes at the foot of the bed, dripping water onto the tiles. Sometimes sitting in the visitor's chair, hands folded, smiling faintly. Once, directly above her, face inverted, hair spilling across Emily's pillow like seaweed. Her mouth never moved, but Emily heard the whisper, "You're still on board." By the second week, Emily began to doubt the world outside her room. Once, she heard laughter, two nurses in the hall, swapping jokes. But when she peeked through the crack in the door, their faces were wrong. Eyes too white, mouths too wide. They walked past, slowly, like passengers finding their seats. Another time, she watched rain streak across the window, droplets racing down glass. But when she leaned closer, the droplets ran upward instead, like condensation on a windshield. And in the reflection, her own face grinned back at her, lips mouthing the word crash. Her screams brought orderlies running. They found nothing. On the 12th night, Emily couldn't bear it anymore. She rose, trembling, IV line tugging at her arm. Her legs wobbled beneath her, still weak, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She shuffled toward the window, dragging the IV stand with her. The parking lot below was empty again. No bus, no figures, just the faint glow of lamps in the fog. She pressed her forehead to the glass. "I know you're there," she whispered. "I know you're waiting." The horn answered, not from outside, from directly behind her. She froze. The air went cold, breath misting the pain. Slowly, against every instinct, she turned. The bus filled her hospital room, seats stretching into the dark, windows lined with pale passengers, eyes fixed forward. The aisle ran straight toward her bed, and at the far end the woman stood, hand clutching the rail, white eyes gleaming. Emily's scream caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, striking the IV stand. It clattered to the floor, saline spilling. She pressed against the window, palms flat, as if she could shove herself through glass. The woman raised one hand, slow, deliberate. She pointed at Emily. The horn blared. Emily dropped to her knees, hands clamped over her ears, tears spilling hot. "Please," she sobbed. "Please let me go." The voice pressed into her skull, heavy as iron. "There is no let go. The road doesn't end." They found her the next morning, curled on the floor, trembling. She couldn't speak, only mumble one sentence again and again until her lips bled. The bus, where did it go? The doctors sedated her. The nurses whispered, papers filled with the word delusion. But Emily knew, even as sleep dragged her under. She heard it, the hum of tires rolling endlessly, the low growl of an engine that never stalled. And in the dark behind her eyes, headlights bloomed. Closer, always closer. Story 4. The House in the Mist of Willow Creek. The road ended where the fog began. Willow Creek was not on any modern map. Its name lingered only in whispered stories passed around lecture halls. Footnotes in local histories too strange to print in textbooks. But for a group of history students in their final year, Anna, Marcus, Leah, and David, it was irresistible. A village wiped out overnight in the late 1800s. Every family gone. Every structure left to rot. They came in David's car, headlights slicing through dense pine forest. The GPS cut out miles back, leaving them to follow a dirt road that narrowed with each bend. Finally, the trees broke, and the fog thickened until it looked less like weather and more like a curtain. Leah pressed her face to the window. It's like the world ends here. Marcus gave a low whistle. Perfect place for a ghost story. Anna said nothing. She sat rigid in the back seat, notebook balanced on her knees, eyes fixed on the fog that seemed to breathe in and out with the rhythm of lungs. When they stepped out of the car, the air clung damp to their clothes. The silence was immediate, heavy, no bird calls, no rustle of wind, just the muted scrape of their shoes on gravel. The village stood ahead, a scattering of wooden houses sagging with rot, roofs bowed, windows blank, ivy strangled chimneys. Fences leaned drunkenly into the fog. The whole place seemed half dissolved, as if refusing to stay in the world of the living. David adjusted his pack. Come on, we'll start with the big one. At the far end of the main road loomed a house larger than the rest. Its frame was crooked, its upper windows dark, but the outline was unmistakable. The manor of the Harrington family, whose story the rumors said had ended in blood. As they drew closer, Anna slowed. Her breath clouded the air, though the cold hadn't deepened. She heard it faint, beneath the crunch of gravel. A sob, low, drawn out, swallowed almost instantly by the fog. She froze. Did you hear that? The others turned. Hear what? Marcus asked. Anna swallowed, scanning the mist. Nothing moved. Never mind, she muttered, but her hands shook as she wrote in her notebook, crying, female, near the house. They reached the gate, half buried in weeds. The metal was slick beneath Marcus's hand as he pushed it open. The hinges groaned, a sound too loud in the silence. The house loomed taller now, boards blackened with age, windows reflecting nothing. The door stood ajar. Anna's stomach twisted. From inside, she thought she heard another sound, this time footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing rotten floorboards. The others didn't react. They didn't hear it. Anna did, and the house was waiting. The door resisted them at first, swollen with damp. Marcus leaned his shoulder into it, wood groaning before giving way with a hollow crack. A gust of stale air rolled out, sharp with mildew and something sweeter beneath, like fruit left too long in a cellar. Leah gagged, pulling her scarf tighter around her mouth. God, it smells like something died in here. David flicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through dust motes that swirled thick as gnats. Probably rats, or worse. Careful where you step. Anna lingered on the threshold. The boards beneath her boots creaked faintly, and she could swear the sound wasn't only beneath her. It echoed deeper, like another set of footsteps falling in rhythm. She pressed her notebook to her chest and stepped inside. The entryway stretched into gloom. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, patterned with faded ivy. The ceiling bowed, water-stained and sagging, as though the house carried a weight it could no longer bear. Their lights revealed the staircase, first a grand thing once, carved banisters coated now in dust and rot. The steps spiraled upward into shadow, vanishing where the second floor should be. Leah whispered, "This place, it feels wrong." Marcus grinned nervously. "Perfect for our project." But his laugh came out brittle. They moved through the ground floor, each footstep a groan from the house's old bones. Furniture slumped beneath sheets of dust, a collapsed armchair, a sideboard mottled with mold. On the wall, a portrait hung crooked. Its frame was gilded but tarnished, glass cracked down the center. Anna raised her light. The painting showed a family, man, woman. Two children posed stiffly, gazes locked outward. Their faces were worn by time, features blurring into smears. Only their eyes remained startlingly clear, painted bright, fixed on anyone who looked too long. Anna shivered. She thought she saw a tear glisten on the woman's cheek. "Anna?" David's voice pulled her back. He stood in the doorway to the next room, beam of his light catching her face. "You okay?" She nodded quickly. clutching her notebook. But she had already scribbled before she realized. Eyes followed me, weeping in the portrait. The kitchen was worse. Rusted pots dangled from hooks, their surfaces eaten away. A long table slumped in the center, a single plate still resting there, rim cracked. The smell was stronger here, sour and wet. Leah brushed her fingers over the table, leaving trails through dust. It looks like they left in a hurry, or didn't get the chance, Marcus muttered. David shot him a look. We're here for research, not ghost stories. But Anna wasn't listening. She drifted toward the back wall, where a narrow door stood half open. She felt the air seeping through it, colder than the rest of the house. Damp, smelling of earth. Her hand moved before she thought, pushing the door wide. The cellar stairs yawned downward, swallowed in black. A sound rose to meet her. Not wind, not rats. A sob, choked, ragged, cut off too quickly. Anna froze. Anna? Leah touched her shoulder. What is it? Anna blinked, throat dry. Didn't you hear? But the cellar was silent again. Only the faint drip of water somewhere below. David frowned. We'll check it later. Stay together for now. Reluctantly, Anna pulled back, but her gaze lingered on the darkness below. Her pencil moved almost on its own. Someone crying in the cellar. They climbed the staircase instead. Each step wailed under their weight. Dust rained from the ceiling when David's hand brushed the banister. The second floor was a corridor of doors, most hanging open, revealing empty rooms. Faded wallpaper peeled in strips. One room held a child's bed frame, rusted springs exposed. Another, a wardrobe collapsed inward, but at the far end was a door closed tight. Marcus reached for the knob. Let's see what the fancy room looks like. Anna's pulse quickened. She didn't want him to open it. She wanted him to leave it shut, to leave whatever waited untouched. The knob resisted. Marcus grunted, pushing harder. The latch gave with a snap, the door swinging inward. The room was a nursery. Tiny chairs sat in a circle, their paint chipped. A doll lay sprawled on the floor, its porcelain face cracked, one glass eye missing. The wallpaper here was bright once, painted with little ships, now water-stained and curling. Leah stepped inside slowly. Oh my God, it's like they just left. Anna's breath hitched. She could hear it again. The sobbing, not from the cellar now, from this room. It rose faintly, hidden in the corners, weaving around the silence like smoke. Her skin prickled. She turned her head and gasped. For a second, in the corner of the nursery, stood a child, a girl in a white dress, face shadowed. She turned her head toward Anna, and her eyes gleamed wet with tears. Anna blinked. The corner was empty. Her chest ached. She pressed her notebook tight, writing with a shaking hand. Child crying, white dress, eyes wet. The others found nothing but dust. David photographed the room, muttering about architectural details. Leah turned the doll over, frowning. Marcus teased her for looking pale, but Anna stood apart, listening. The sobbing hadn't gone. It was in the walls now, in the floorboards, in her own ribs. Each sound reverberated inside her, threading into her bones. And when she closed her eyes, she could hear words. Not just sobbing, pleading. Stay. Her eyes snapped open. The fog outside the nursery window thickened, pressing against the glass as if the house itself exhaled it. The pane shivered faintly, mist crawling inside at the corners. Anna stepped closer without meaning to, fingers brushing the sill. Her breath clouded the cold glass. In the reflection, just for a blink, she didn't see herself. She saw the woman from the portrait, her lips moving, whispering. Anna staggered back, notebook clattering to the floor. Anna? Leah bent, picking it up. Hey, are you all right? You're white as a sheet. Anna forced a smile, though her teeth chattered. Just cold. But inside, she knew the truth. The house had noticed her, and it wasn't going to let go. The fog pressed heavier against the windows as night settled. It was impossible to tell where the mist ended and the glass began. The house felt smaller, its walls pulling closer, as though each exhale from the students was absorbed and not returned. They gathered in what remained of the parlor, flashlights propped to scatter light across dust-choked furniture. David cataloged notes on his tablet. Marcus filmed with his phone. Leah sat hunched, sketching the crooked banister. Anna sat apart, notebook open on her knees. She wasn't writing. She was listening. Her pencil trembled above the page, moving without thought, scratching words in a jagged hand. They never left. The children wait. The mother weeps. The house remembers. Leah glanced over her shoulder. Anna? What's that supposed to mean? Anna blinked down at the words. For a moment, she didn't recognize her own handwriting. The letters curved differently, harsh, almost frantic. She flipped the page shut. Just impressions, she murmured. Marcus chuckled, though it rang too loud in the stillness. Creepy impressions. But David frowned. Let's stay focused. This house is a site, not a seance. Later, when they searched the upstairs bedrooms, Anna drifted. The others moved from room to room, cataloging artifacts. A warped vanity, a trunk of moth-eaten clothes, a bed frame that sagged under dust. But Anna lingered in the nursery. The doll still lay on the floor, cracked eye gleaming in flashlight beam. The child's chair circle seemed subtly rearranged, as if someone had been playing. She crouched, fingertips brushing the floorboards. The wood pulsed faintly, like something breathing beneath. She closed her eyes. The sobbing returned, clearer now. A girl's voice, choked with grief, and beneath it, a woman's whisper soft, pleading. Stay with us. Don't leave. Anna's lips moved before she could stop them. I won't. Her eyes snapped open. She hadn't meant to say it. Her voice hadn't even sounded like hers. When she rejoined the group, the change was subtle but undeniable. Her steps were slower, deliberate, as if she was listening to rhythms no one else heard. Her eyes lingered too long on corners, on shadows. Leah noticed first. Anna, you're pale. Maybe we should rest. I'm fine, Anna said, but the words were flat, mechanical. Marcus laughed nervously. She's just caught the mood. You're scaring yourself, Anna. Anna turned to him. Her expression was blank, but her voice carried something colder. It's not me who's scared. The silence after was heavier than the fog. That night, they made camp in the parlor. Sleeping bags unrolled, lantern dimmed. The house sighed around them, boards expanding, nails popping in the cold. Anna lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her notebook lay open on her chest, though she didn't remember opening it. Her hand moved across the page, pencil scrawling words in the dark. They burned. They screamed. The father's hands broke. The mother's mouth filled with smoke. The children waited. Her eyes blurred. She whispered the words as she wrote them, though the voice was not hers. It was older, rougher, thick with sorrow. Leah stirred beside her, blinking. Anna? Who are you talking to? Anna turned her head slowly. In the dim light, her face looked wrong, cheeks hollowed by shadows, eyes shining wide. They want me to remember, she said softly. Leah sat up uneasy. Who? Anna's smile was faint, chilling. The house. By morning, the changes deepened. Anna didn't eat. She wandered the halls barefoot, tracing the walls with her fingertips, whispering to herself. Sometimes she laughed, a low sound that cut sharp in the silence. David confronted her gently. Anna, you're exhausted. You need rest. You're not yourself. She tilted her head, lips curling in a half-smile. Maybe myself was never enough. Marcus tried to joke it off, but his voice cracked. Creepy, but A-plus performance if this were a haunted house tour. But when Anna turned her gaze on him, he flinched. Her eyes were wet, not with tears, but with condensation, like fog seeping from within. That afternoon, David found her in the kitchen, standing at the cellar door. The smell of damp earth seeped stronger from the gap. He laid a hand on her shoulder. Don't go down there alone. Anna didn't look at him. They're waiting. The children, they're so cold. David's grip tightened. Anna, there's nothing down there but rot. She turned then, and her smile froze him in place. How would you know? The words weren't hers. The voice wasn't hers. It was layered hers and another woman's, echoing faintly beneath. David stepped back, pulse hammering. Anna, but she had already turned away, descending into the dark. When the others followed, flashlights piercing the cellar, they found her crouched against the far wall. Her notebook lay open on her knees, scrawled with frantic lines. She whispered as she wrote, her voice breaking. The walls burned. The floor screamed. We couldn't leave. The house wouldn't let us. Leah's breath hitched. Anna, stop, please. Anna looked up. Her eyes gleamed white in the beam, clouded like glass. Her voice was soft, and not her own. It's starting again. The cellar door slammed shut. The sound cracked like a rifle through the house, reverberating up the staircase. Dust cascaded from the beams overhead. Leah shrieked and bolted for the door, grabbing the handle. It wouldn't budge. Anna. David pounded his fist against the wood, the thuds hollow and final. Open it. From the other side came silence, then scratching. Fingernails against stone. Leah backed away, trembling. It doesn't want us to have her. Anne. Marcus tried to laugh, but the sound broke midway. It's just old hinges, okay? The house is shifting. That's all. He shoved David aside, shoulder, checking the door. It rattled, but didn't move. Then the handle turned. Slowly, deliberately. The door swung open by itself, the cellar yawning black before them. The air that rose out was wet and foul, like earth mixed with blood. Anna? David called. No answer. The beam of his flashlight cut across the stone steps, catching damp patches that gleamed, slick. Footprints, bare, small, leading down. Leah clutched his sleeve. We shouldn't. We can't leave her, David said, his voice strained but resolute. So they descended. The cellar was deeper than it should have been. Steps stretched farther than the house's frame allowed, the air growing colder, wetter with each one. The walls wept moisture, stones slick beneath their fingers. When they finally reached the bottom, their light swept across a cavernous room. It wasn't just a cellar. It was a crypt. Rows of broken furniture leaned against the walls, half buried in damp earth. Rusted tools lay scattered. In the far corner, something like an altar sagged beneath a sheet of mold, and crouched against the far wall, notebook in hand, was Anna. Her pencil scratched furiously across the page, though her eyes weren't on it. They stared ahead, blank and clouded white, lips moving soundlessly. Leah whispered, "Oh God." David knelt, gripping Anna's wrist. "Anna, stop this." Her hand jerked violently, stronger than it should have been, continuing to scrawl. The words filled the page in a frantic hand, not hers. The door closed. The floor burned. We screamed and no one came. David tore the pencil from her fingers. She hissed like something feral, lunging at him, teeth bared. Her strength shocked him. It took both him and Marcus to pin her arms. Her voice split, layered. Hers and another woman's. "Leave me. Leave us." Leah's sob echoed in the dark. Then the cellar shook. It began with a groan, low and deep, vibrating through the stones. Dust sifted from the ceiling, raining onto their hair and shoulders. The floorboards above creaked as if hundreds of feet stamped across them. David's flashlight swung upward. The ceiling bulged, bending downward like a lung inhaling. Then it snapped back, boards quivering, as though the house had just breathed. The cellar door slammed again, this time from the outside. They were sealed in. Leah screamed. "It doesn't want us to leave." The steps behind them shuddered, stones cracking, stairwell collapsing in a spray of dust. The way back was gone. Marcus dropped Anna's arm, stumbling backward. "We're trapped." But Anna only laughed, a thin, broken sound. Her eyes glowed faintly in the beam of David's light, milky white, inhuman. "They're still here," she whispered. "Can't you hear them?" And then they did. At first it was faint, a child's giggle, a woman's sigh. But the sounds grew, filling the cellar, whispers threading the air, sobs swelling from the walls. Footsteps padded across the dirt, though no one walked there. Shadows lengthened in corners where no light should reach. The altar pulsed faintly, a wet gleam spreading across its surface. Leah dropped to her knees, covering her ears. "Make it stop, please, make it stop." David grabbed Anna's shoulders, shaking her. "Anna, fight this. You have to fight it." But her lips curled into a smile that wasn't hers. "The house has already chosen. It needs someone to remember." The whispers surged louder, swirling around them in a storm of grief and rage. Boards above cracked like gunshots. Something slammed against the cellar walls from the outside. Fists, faces. They couldn't tell. The whole house was moving. Then Anna went still, her head tilted, ear pressed to the wall as though listening. She whispered, "They're upstairs." The next moment, she bolted, running into the shadows at the far end of the cellar, vanishing into a gap between stones. "Anna." David shouted, chasing after her. The gap led to a passage they hadn't seen, narrow and jagged, carved into earth. They scrambled after her, flashlights trembling. The passage twisted upward, steep and suffocating, until it spat them out onto the second floor of the house. They stumbled into the nursery, and there she was. Anna stood in the circle of chairs, doll clutched to her chest, rocking back and forth. Her eyes glowed white, her lips moving. "They never left," she whispered. "They're in the walls, in the floor, in me." Marcus approached cautiously. "Anna, put it down, please." She looked up. For a moment, her face softened. Anna, their friend, trembling beneath something heavier. Then her voice fractured again, layered with another's. "You shouldn't have come here." The nursery door slammed shut. The whole house shuddered. Windows rattled, glass cracking. The staircase groaned, boards bending under invisible weight. The parlor furniture toppled one by one. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling upward as if inhaled by unseen mouths. And Anna began to scream. Her body arched, the doll falling from her grasp. Her fingers clawed the air. Her voice split into many hers, a woman's, children's cries, all screaming at once. Leah collapsed against the wall, sobbing. "She's gone. We've lost her." David shook his head, tears streaking his face. "No, we can't leave her. We won't." But the floor beneath them quaked, dust choking the air. Boards split open, black void gaping below. The whole house seemed intent on swallowing them, on keeping them the way it had kept the Harringtons. And Anna's scream cut into laughter, high, broken, echoing from walls and floor and ceiling at once. The house had awakened, and it was hungry. The house buckled around them. Plaster split from the walls, raining dust into their lungs. Floorboards snapped, one after another, like bones breaking in sequence. Somewhere deep inside the structure, a low groan built into a roar, as though the house itself were exhaling centuries of grief. David grabbed Leah's arm, dragging her toward the door. Marcus followed, flashlight beam jerking wildly across collapsing wallpaper. But Anna didn't move. She stood in the nursery center, hair plastered to her damp face, eyes clouded white, her lips curled in a faint smile, though tears tracked down her cheeks. "You can't leave," she whispered. The words trembled with voices not hers, layered, overlapping, old. "It won't let you." David lunged for her, hands gripping her shoulders. "Anna, please, fight it." For a heartbeat, her expression flickered, Anna's fear surfacing. "David, help me." Then her eyes rolled back, and her body convulsed. The house shrieked with her, windows exploding outward, shards carried off by the fog. The sound knocked David flat. His flashlight clattered away, beams spinning across the ruined floor. "Go," Marcus shouted, voice cracking. "We can't stay here." Leah was already pulling at David, half sobbing, half screaming. He looked back at Anna one last time. She stood rigid, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the nursery floor, reaching for them even as the fog pressed thicker. Then the floor split wide, and the house roared again. They fled, down the staircase that groaned beneath each step, through the parlor where the portrait now bled dark streaks from the eyes, out the sagging doorway into the choking fog. The gate hung wide, metal shrieking as it swung against stone. Behind them, the house shuddered once more. Its roof collapsed inward with a deafening crack. Dust billowed, swallowed instantly by mist. Leah sobbed as they stumbled toward the car. Marcus fumbled the keys with shaking hands, finally wrenching the door open. "Where's Anna?" he demanded, voice shrill. David shook his head, tears cutting lines through the grime on his cheeks. "She's gone." The words broke something inside Leah, but she didn't argue. She shoved herself into the back seat, hands trembling violently. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared alive. Marcus slammed the gas. Tires spun in mud before catching, propelling them down the broken road. The fog pressed against the windshield, dense as stone. For a moment, it felt like they weren't moving at all. Then, slowly, the mist began to thin. Trees materialized on either side, skeletal and dripping. The road widened, gravel crunching beneath the tires, and ahead dawned. A pale glow seeped across the horizon, bleeding gold into gray. Leah gasped. "We're out." David didn't answer. He sat rigid in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the side mirror, because in the reflection, just for an instant, he saw her. Anna, sitting calmly in the back seat, white eyes fixed on him. He twisted around, heart hammering. The seat was empty, only Leah trembling, clutching her knees. David swallowed hard, turning forward again. He didn't speak. They drove in silence. The village vanished behind them, consumed once more by fog. The road stretched long and narrow, familiar trees greeting them like survivors. The world felt too normal, too bright. Birds even sang in the distance. It was almost enough to make them believe they'd imagined it. Almost. Marcus exhaled shakily, knuckles white on the wheel. We're never talking about this again. Never. Leah shook her head violently. What about Anna? We can't just... She's gone. Marcus snapped. His voice cracked, breaking into something raw. She's gone, Leah. You saw it. She wasn't Anna anymore. Leah's sob filled the car. She pressed her face into her hands. David said nothing. He stared out the passenger window, eyes unfocused. He thought he still heard her voice, threaded through the hum of the tires. Help me. They reached the main road by sunrise. The fog had lifted entirely, leaving the world crisp and bright. Cars passed, ordinary, their drivers oblivious. The village of Willow Creek might as well never have existed. For the first time since stepping into that mist, David allowed himself a deep breath. It tasted sharp with morning air, free of mildew and ash. Relief washed over him until Leah's scream shattered it. She was pointing at the passenger window. David turned, his blood iced. Across the glass, traced by a wet finger, were words. Come back. The letters dripped slowly, streaking the glass though no hand had touched it. Marcus cursed, swerving dangerously before righting the car. What the hell, what the hell? David stared, throat locked tight. His pulse thundered in his ears. The glass cleared as quickly as it had marked, the words dissolving into streaks of water, but in the reflection, for a fraction of a second, he saw her again. Anna. Her face pressed against the glass, mouth moving in silence, and though no sound reached his ears, David knew what she said. It's not over. When they finally returned to campus, the car sat silent for long minutes before anyone moved. Leah stared blankly at her lap. Marcus gripped the wheel as though still driving. David's hand rested against the window. It was dry now, perfectly ordinary, but he knew the mark wasn't on the glass. It was on them. Story 5. The Puppet in the Old Manor. New Orleans has always carried its ghosts. Some you hear in the jazz echoing through the quarter at 2 in the morning. Others hide in the cracks of the old mansions, their shutters groaning in the wet wind, their gardens strangled by vines. Emily didn't believe in any of that. She only believed in paperwork, the kind that told her she was the last living descendant of Agatha Vauclain, a great-aunt she had never met, whose estate had sat abandoned for decades. The lawyers were clear. The house was hers now. Hers to sell, demolish, or keep. She should have sold it. The cab led her off on a street where moss crawled across wrought iron gates, and the air smelled of rot and rain. The Vauclain Manor loomed at the end. 3 stories of sagging grandeur, shutters hanging like half-closed eyes. The mist rising off the bayou clung to its walls as though reluctant to let it go. Emily hauled her suitcase up the front steps, the wood slick with mildew. The key resisted the lock, as though the house didn't want her inside. But with a final twist, the door opened, and the stale air of decades poured out dust, old fabric, and something sharper. Inside, the foyer stretched tall, ceilings lost in shadow. Cobwebs draped chandeliers like funeral veils. Floorboards moaned with every step. Her footsteps echoed, but not alone somewhere deeper in the house. Something creaked in answer. She told herself it was settling wood. She had to. She found the gallery on the 2nd floor. The room was long, lined with glass cabinets. Dozens of figures stared back at her through warped panes. Marionettes, hand puppets, dolls in velvet gowns. Their painted faces were cracked, smiles chipped, eyes dulled by dust. All but one, at the far end of the gallery, set apart in a tall case, stood a puppet unlike the rest. Its carved wooden body was robed in black silk, its painted face pale as bone, lips curved faintly, not a smile, but something near contempt. Its eyes gleamed wet, alive, catching the dim light and holding it. Emily froze. For a moment, she swore the head tilted, just slightly, acknowledging her. A brass plaque on the case read only, "Margaret." The name prickled in her memory, half remembered from some folk story she'd heard as a child. A witch, a curse, a punishment sealed in wood. Emily pressed her hands to her jeans, forcing a laugh. Creepy, but valuable. Some collector will pay for you. But as she turned away, she felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. That night she couldn't sleep. Rain lashed the windows, and the old house shifted with every gust. She lay in the master bedroom, staring at the ceiling where cracks branched like veins. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the puppet's face, those wet eyes that almost smile. Sometime past midnight, a sound woke her. Wood tapping. Soft. Deliberate. She sat up, heart hammering. The sound came from the hallway outside. Tap. Tap. Pausa. Tap. She crept to the door, pressing her ear against it. The tapping stopped. And then faint, almost swallowed by the rain, came a whisper. Not words. Not yet. Just the rise and fall of breath, as though someone stood on the other side, waiting. The storm had not broken by morning. Emily woke to a pale, wet light filtering through moth-eaten curtains, the patter of rain a steady pulse against the window panes. Her neck ached from the mattress's sag, her body still wrapped in the fog of half-sleep. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then the musty smell of the room reminded her. The house was hers now. She told herself the tapping she'd heard in the night was a dream, nothing more. Old houses made old noises. She repeated that thought as she dressed, as she padded through the halls with a mug of instant coffee, as she forced herself into the gallery again. The puppets stared at her from behind their glass. Their cracked smiles hadn't changed. Their limbs still hung limp. Except, she stopped. The doll in the faded velvet gown. Yesterday, its head had been tilted to the right. She was sure of it. Now it faced forward, glass eyes locked on her. Emily exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I must be remembering wrong. But as she turned to leave, she caught it in the corner of her eye. Another puppet. Its wooden hand pressed flat against the glass, where yesterday it had rested at its side. She fled the room before she could check any further. The day dragged. Rain pinned her indoors. The manor's corridors dark even at noon. She busied herself with sorting through boxes, papers, relics left behind, journals in spidery script she couldn't read, contracts eaten through by mold, letters sealed with broken wax. Every drawer seemed to hold fragments of lives cut short, but she couldn't shake the sense that she wasn't sorting alone, that the house was watching her, judging what she touched, what she set aside. By late afternoon, she gave up, curling on the bed with her laptop. The Wi-Fi was weak, barely clinging to signal. She managed to pull up a few half-baked articles about the Vauclain family, but none about Agatha herself. Only one mention struck her, a story of Margaret the Witch, trapped not in earth or stone, but in wood. The line was buried in a blog post about New Orleans folklore. No citation, no explanation. Emily shut the laptop with a snap. When the thunder rolled again outside, she nearly leapt. Night fell thick and early. She left the gallery door closed, refusing even to glance toward it as she padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. The pipes gurgled, protesting, before delivering a weak stream that smelled faintly metallic. She drank anyway. The house creaked overhead. A door thumped shut somewhere, though no wind blew. Emily froze, water glass trembling in her hand. The thump came again, closer this time. Then the unmistakable sound of feet, not heavy, light, wooden. She spun, heart climbing her throat. The corridor stretched empty, shadows puddling beneath the sconces. But she knew. The sound was coming from the gallery. She crept upstairs, each step squealing. The gallery door loomed at the end of the corridor, shut tight. The wood looked darker now, as if it had soaked in the night. She hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. Every instinct screamed at her to turn away, to run, but something pulled her forward. The knob was cold against her palm. She twisted. The door swung open with a slow sigh. The gallery was dark. Her flashlight beam cut through the glass cases, illuminating faces that seemed sharper, more alert. The marionettes hung stiff, strings twisted, but their eyes glittered with a sheen she hadn't noticed before. Her light swept across one cabinet and froze. The puppet in velvet. Its glass case stood open. The figure inside was gone. Emily's breath stopped. She swung the beam wildly across the room. Empty. Empty. Until, there, the puppet sat on the floorboards directly in front of Margaret's case. Its head lolled, its limbs splayed, but its face was upturned toward Margaret, as if awaiting command. Emily staggered back. Her heel struck something solid. She spun, light catching another puppet. It stood against the wall now, though she swore it had been locked in a case. Its painted grin stretched wide, cracks splitting the enamel. Emily dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, skewing the shadows into jerking shapes, and in the dark she heard it, whispering, low, layered, hundreds of voices tangled together. Her name, Emily. She clutched her ears, squeezing her eyes shut. No, no, no. The whispering grew clearer, a woman's voice rising above the rest. You've come home. She bolted, out of the gallery, down the staircase 2 steps at a time, slamming the master bedroom door behind her. She locked it, pressed her back against the wood, panting. The whispering dulled but didn't vanish. It threaded through the house, carried on the rain, seeping through cracks. When she finally crawled into bed, she pulled the blanket over her head like a child. Sleep came in jagged fragments. In one dream, she stood in the gallery, Margaret's eyes gleaming alive. In another, strings dangled from the ceiling, wrapping around her wrists, her ankles, tugging her upward until she dangled helpless above the cases. She woke gasping, sweat chilling her skin. The whisper still echoed faintly in her ears, and on the bedside table, where she had left only her phone, sat something else. A puppet, its velvet gown damp with rain, its glass eyes fixed unblinking on her face. Emily didn't touch the puppet. She couldn't bring herself to. It sat motionless on the bedside table, velvet gown slick with moisture, glass eyes staring through the dark. Every time she looked away, she half expected it to move, turn its head, curl its fingers, open its mouth. By morning, it was gone. The table stood empty, as though she'd imagined everything, but the blanket she had wrapped around herself was damp, threaded with strands of black silk that hadn't been there before. She didn't sleep again. The days blurred. Rain softened into mist, the house breathing in rhythm with the weather. Emily roamed its corridors in a haze, carrying her flashlight even in daylight. The puppets changed when she wasn't looking. She'd passed the gallery door closed, and when she opened it an hour later, half the cases stood ajar. The figures were always arranged differently, some clustered near Margaret's case, others seated neatly on the floor as though attending a sermon. Margaret herself never moved. Yet Emily couldn't shake the certainty that every shift came from her, as though the others were satellites pulled into orbit. On the third night, Emily saw her in the mirror. She was brushing her hair in the master bedroom, trying to lull herself with the ordinary rhythm of bristles through tangles. The mirror on the vanity was clouded, its silver warped by time. Still, her reflection stared back tired, pale, lips pressed tight, until it didn't. Her face flickered, just for a second. Her own eyes went cloudy white. Her lips curved into Margaret's faint, contemptuous smile. The brush clattered from her hand. She blinked, heart racing, and her reflection was normal again. Almost, because behind her shoulder she saw another figure. Margaret, the puppet, stood just inside the doorway, head tilted, black silk dripping like water. Emily spun. The room was empty. She began hearing Margaret's voice more clearly, not a whisper anymore, a presence, threading through her thoughts, shaping them before she realized. When she walked past the kitchen, she heard it in the clink of pans. Open the cellar. When she climbed the stairs, it pressed through the groaning wood. You belong upstairs. When she tried to read by lamplight, the bulb hissed, sputtered, and she heard the voice inside her skull, rich and low. Read my words, not theirs. And always underneath, a promise. You will not leave this house. You will become it. One rain-choked morning, she followed the voice. It led her to the library, a room she had avoided. The air there was heavier, curtains mildewed, shelves swollen with damp, books sagged in crooked rows, many gnawed by insects. Papers lay scattered across the desk, their ink bled into blur. But in the bottom drawer, beneath layers of moth-ravaged cloth, she found it, a ledger bound in cracked leather. The name on the spine was burned, almost illegible. Inside, the script was spidery, cramped. The pages smelled of ash. She forced herself to read. We purchased her from the islands. They said she was only a woman. They lied. The children would not eat when she looked at them. The dogs howled. The mirrors showed her face, even when she was not there. So we built her new skin, wood and silk, wax and paint. We carved her into a puppet and tied her with strings, a cage of hands, so she could never use her own again. But curses are not destroyed. They are only passed. The blood of our house is tied to hers. Whoever keeps the manor keeps her. Whoever inherits it becomes the next shell. Emily slammed the book shut, bile burning her throat. Her chest ached, as though strings tugged inside her ribs. The voice purred, pleased. You understand now. We are one house, one skin. You carry me already. She dropped the ledger, stumbling back. The shelves groaned, books spilling as though shoved by invisible hands. In the fractured glass of a cabinet door, her reflection swam into view. It wasn't her face. It was Margaret, smiling wider now, lips curling with triumph. Emily screamed, but the sound died in her throat, smothered by the whisper rising all around her. The puppets had begun to laugh. The days lost their shape. Emily woke without remembering sleep, her body heavy, her mind blurred. She caught herself standing in rooms without knowing why she had walked there. The kitchen, the library, the gallery, always the gallery. She would find herself in front of Margaret's case, hand pressed to the glass, forehead damp with breath. Once, she swore she saw the puppet's fingers lift toward hers, as though the glass wasn't a barrier at all. By the end of the week, the changes were impossible to deny. Her reflection no longer obeyed her. She would tilt her head left and see herself tilt right. She would frown and see a smile bloom on her lips instead. Her body betrayed her in small ways. A twitch in her hand, a turn of her head that wasn't hers, the sensation of invisible strings tightening through her shoulders, her wrists, her spine. When she tried to write, her hand moved of its own accord. Jagged words filled the page in a voice she didn't recognize. We are many. You are one. You will be ours. Emily tore the paper, shredded it into confetti, but the message lingered in her skull like an echo she couldn't silence. One afternoon, a knock startled her from a daze. It was Louise, the lawyer's assistant, come to deliver more paperwork. The woman stood on the porch with a leather folder tucked under her arm, polite smile faltering when she saw Emily. Miss Vauclain, are you all right? You look... She hesitated. You look very tired. Emily tried to answer, but her voice came out wrong. Hi, brittle. The house keeps me busy. Louise frowned. Busy? Doing what? Emily's lips moved before she could stop them. Feeding the children. Louise's face drained of color. She took a step back. Emily blinked, horrified. I didn't mean But Louise was already retreating down the steps, mumbling something about returning later. Emily slammed the door shut, chest heaving. Her hands trembled violently. When she held them up, she could almost see it. Thin threads, glinting faintly in the light, pulling at her fingers. When she clenched her fists, the threads tightened. That night, she fought to stay awake. She told herself she wouldn't let the strings pull her again. But exhaustion won. She woke standing in the gallery. The cases were open, every puppet arranged in a circle on the floor, their painted faces turned toward the center, where she stood barefoot, nightdress clinging with sweat. Margaret's case was empty. Emily froze. Her arms lifted, jerked upward by something she couldn't resist. Her legs followed, stepping stiffly into the center of the circle. The puppets' heads bobbed in unison, as if nodding approval, and then she heard it laughter. Children's laughter, layered with Margaret's low whisper. Dance. Her limbs obeyed. Her body jerked into a grotesque mimicry of grace, knees snapping, shoulders twisting. She twirled, arms outstretched, head lolling on her neck. She screamed, but the sound didn't leave her throat. It came out as hollow wooden clicks, like the clatter of a marionette. The puppets clapped their little hands. When she collapsed at last, gasping, she saw Margaret, not as wood, not as silk, but as a woman, pale, tall, with eyes like wet glass. She stood behind the circle, smiling faintly. You're learning, she whispered. Emily woke sprawled on the gallery floor, bruises blossoming across her knees. The circle of puppets had returned to their cases. Margaret sat pristine in her glass cabinet, silk robes untouched, but the bruises remained. The ache in her joints was real. The taste of laughter still lingered in her mouth. 2 days later, Louise returned. She brought another man with her, a property assessor, here to appraise the manor. Emily tried to act normal. She put on clean clothes, brushed her hair, smiled at the doorway. But both Louise and the assessor stiffened when they saw her. Her smile was too wide. Her eyes didn't blink often enough. When Louise asked if she'd had any trouble adjusting, Emily's answer came slow, deliberate, as though spoken through her. "The house is adjusting to me." "Da," Louise faltered. The assessor coughed, avoiding her gaze. Emily felt it then, the strings tugging her lips into a grin, tugging her voice into a whisper. "Would you like to meet them?" Louise paled. "Meet who?" Emily's smile widened further, splitting her lips. "The others." The silence that followed pressed heavy as the fog outside. Louise muttered something about rescheduling, ushered the assessor away, and hurried down the steps. Emily watched them flee, her body still frozen in that terrible grin, until the strings slackened and released her. She collapsed against the door, shaking. Tears streamed down her face, but her mouth still moved on its own, whispering words she hadn't chosen. "Soon you won't fight. Soon you will be still." That night, she didn't bother locking the bedroom door. She knew it wouldn't matter. When she looked in the mirror, she saw Margaret smiling back. And this time the smile was hers too. The house no longer waited for night. By morning, Emily already felt the strings. Invisible threads tugged at her joints, guiding her down hallways she didn't mean to walk. Her feet scraped the wooden floors in patterns not her own. She tried to fight it at first. She locked herself in the bedroom, shoved a chair under the knob. But the strings didn't need doors. Her hand lifted against her will, pulled the chair aside, unlatched the lock, opened the door. She whispered stop until her throat cracked, but the strings didn't stop. They tightened. She stopped eating. Every time she tried to bring food to her lips, her jaw clenched shut, her hand jerked away. The house didn't want her fed. It wanted her hollow. Her reflection no longer belonged to her. The mirror showed her body moving when she stood still, her lips whispering when she was silent. Margaret's pale face superimposed on hers, smiling faintly. At night, Emily felt herself rise from bed, body stiff as a doll's. She would walk to the gallery, where the puppets waited. They were always arranged differently, seated in pews, lined along the walls, kneeling in prayer. And always, she stood at the center. Margaret's glass case was always empty. The voices followed her everywhere now. Sometimes it was children giggling in the vents. Sometimes a man's harsh whisper in the crack of the floor. Sometimes dozens of voices murmuring in unison, rising to a chant she couldn't understand. But Margaret's voice always cut through them. "You belong to us. The strings are yours now. Don't fight them. Wear them." Emily's head jerked in a nod she hadn't chosen. Her lips stretched into a smile she didn't feel. And in that moment, she understood. The puppets had never been wood and silk alone. They were vessels, houses of flesh, emptied and reshaped. And she was next. One evening, a storm rattled the shutters until nails squealed in their sockets. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rolling over the city. The gallery glowed faintly with candlelight, though Emily hadn't lit any candles. She walked in stiffly, barefoot, her nightdress clinging damp. The puppets were gathered in a circle again, their faces turned toward the center, and in the center stood a figure. Not wood, not silk, Emily. Her own body, pale and rigid, strings glistening in the air, pulling from wrists and ankles, spine and jaw. She saw herself smile, then the strings yanked, and she stumbled forward, into the circle. Her vision doubled. She couldn't tell which body was hers anymore. Margaret's voice filled her skull. 2 skins, 1 soul. Choose. But she had no choice. The strings chose for her. Days later, Louise returned. She brought another lawyer this time, wary but professional, determined to finalize the inheritance papers. The house greeted them with silence. The foyer smelled of mildew and wax. The air clung damp to their throats. "Miss Vauclain?" Louise called, her voice echoing up the stairs. No answer. They explored cautiously. The parlor sagged under dust. The kitchen reeked of rot. Every room looked abandoned, as though no one had lived there in years. Until they reached the gallery. The door hung half open. Inside, the puppets sat in their glass cases, arranged neatly, their painted faces smiling faintly, all except one. In the tallest case at the end of the room stood a new figure, a woman in a nightdress, pale and rigid, glass eyes fixed forward. Her hair framed her face stiffly, her lips painted into a faint smile. Strings threaded from her wrists and ankles into the shadows above. Louisa gasped, stumbling backward. "Oh my God." But the lawyer beside her only frowned, squinting. In addition to the collection, neither spoke again, because in the glass, just faintly, the woman's lips moved. Not wood, not paint, skin, and her eyes wet. Human eyes shifted toward them. That night, when the storm passed, the house sighed with satisfaction. The gallery stood silent. The puppets did not move, and in the tallest case, Emily stood among them, her eyes glazed, her body still, a perfect part of the collection. Somewhere in the silence, faint and almost tender, Margaret's voice whispered through the beams. One more string pulled tight. One more voice made quiet. The house remembers. Story 6, The Curse in the Smoke. There are houses you pass without looking twice, and then there are houses that seem to wait for you. On the edge of town, where the road bent away from the river and the street lamp stopped, stood a place the locals only called the House of Smoke. No one had lived there for decades. Its shutters dangled half loose, its roof sagged, and ivy pulled at its brick like greedy fingers. But what made it feared wasn't its decay. It was the smoke. On certain nights, when the fog rolled in thick from the water, white vapor leaked from the house, not from a chimney or a fire, but from its very walls. It hissed through the cracks in the shutters, curled out of the keyholes, drifted across the yard. And if you stood too close, people swore you'd hear voices woven into that smoke, voices calling names, voices crying, voices that didn't stop even when you covered your ears. Alex had heard the stories all his life. He was 15 now, old enough to roll his eyes when older kids tried to scare him with whispered dares. But deep down, he carried something heavier than fear, curiosity. What was in there? Why did the smoke come? And why, whenever he dreamt of the house, did it feel like it was waiting for him? The night he finally went, the air itself seemed to draw him. The town was quiet, the streets glistening with rain. His sneakers slapped against pavement, his breath misted, and the closer he got to the house, the thicker the fog grew. It wasn't ordinary fog. He felt it before he even saw it. It clung warmer than the night air, tinged with the acrid smell of something burned long ago. His throat tightened as he stepped into the yard, where weeds grew waist-high and the porch sagged like a trap. The smoke seeped from the cracks exactly as the stories said, thin tendrils curling like fingers across the steps, pale ribbons sliding along the railings. Alex froze, pulse quickening. For a moment he thought he heard it soft, woven into the hiss of vapor, a sound like weeping. He shook his head, clutching the strap of his backpack tighter. "It's just air," he whispered to himself. "Just fog." But the smoke curled toward him, as though answering. The door gave easily under his hand, wood swollen from years of storms. It swung inward with a groan, and the smoke greeted him in a slow exhale. Inside, the air was thick, damp. Wallpaper sagged from the walls in strips, the patterns stained with dark streaks. Furniture crouched beneath dust, tables buckled, chairs missing legs, and everywhere smoke. It didn't rise. It clung low, swirling in the corners, gathering like it had weight. His flashlight beam cut through it in a trembling cone, but the smoke seemed to bend away, closing back in once the light passed. The house smelled of rot and iron, like damp wood and something older like sorrow itself. Alex stepped inside, careful, every board beneath him groaning. His sneakers left trails in the smoke that closed immediately behind him. The sound was faint at first, just a sigh, almost lost in the creak of the floor. But then it came again, drawn out, weary. A voice. He spun, flashlight jerking across the ruined parlor. Nothing but chairs slumped under cloth, shadows stretching too long. But the smoke shifted, curling upward into shapes that almost resembled faces before dissolving. Alex whispered, "Hello." The word trembled out of him. The house seemed to listen, and then so soft it almost wasn't sound at all, the smoke answered. "Alex." His throat closed. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. He hadn't said his plan aloud, and yet his name drifted through the room, carried on vapor. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over a collapsed table. His flashlight beam swung across the far wall, catching a picture frame crooked with age. The glass was shattered, but behind it, faded ink scrawled across yellowed paper, a page torn from a journal. He drew closer, heart pounding. The handwriting was tight, spidery, letters pressed hard into the paper as though carved. They took everything from me. My friend, my brother in all but blood, he betrayed me. He sold my name for gold. And so I curse this house to remember. Let the smoke rise with my grief until justice is spoken. Alex's skin prickled. The signature was gone. Ink bled away. But beneath, 3 words remained, underlined again and again. Smoke remembers. Smoke remembers. Smoke remembers. He backed away, his chest tightening. The words blurred in the beam of his light. The smoke curled thicker, pressing against his ankles, his wrists, his throat. The voice came again, not weeping this time, but hoarse, desperate. Find him. Find the one who betrayed me. Alex's flashlight flickered. The smoke surged up the walls, filling the ceiling, swallowing the windows until there was no way out but deeper inside. And Alex understood, with a kind of dread that chilled him to the bone. The house hadn't just waited for anyone. It had waited for him. Alex pressed his back to the parlor wall, lungs tight, the word "find him" still coiling through his head. The smoke pressed against him like damp cloth, and though it had no weight, he felt it settle on his chest. His flashlight wavered. The beam caught motes of ash drifting through the air, except there was no fire, no hearth, nothing burning. Something in him screamed to run, but another part deeper, heavier, pulled him forward. The journal page on the wall had been only a fragment. Somewhere in this house was the rest. The smoke wanted him to see it. He moved through the corridor, floor groaning beneath each step. The wallpaper had peeled away in long strips, curling like shed skin. His light skated over picture frames whose faces had been cut out, leaving only empty silhouettes. The smoke followed. It clung to his shoes, pooled at his ankles, rose faintly around his hands. Sometimes he thought he saw words, shaping in it, letters forming, then drifting apart. At the end of the corridor, he found a door half off its hinges. He pushed it open, coughing as the smoke thickened. It was a study. Shelves leaned against the walls, their wood swollen and buckled. Books sagged in rows, their spines gnawed by time. The desk in the center was covered in papers, most curled and blackened at the edges, as if licked by flame. And there, half buried under brittle sheets, was a journal. Its leather binding was cracked, but intact. Alex set his flashlight down, hands trembling as he opened the cover. The first page bore the same sharp handwriting he'd seen on the parlor wall. March 3rd, 1841. He promised me loyalty, promised me we were bound by blood, if not by name. Yet I see him whispering in corners, trading my trust for coin. I hear his voice in taverns when he thinks me absent. He steals what was mine. I feel the knife before it strikes. I smell the smoke already. Alex turned the page, breath shallow. The words were fevered, pressed so hard they nearly tore the paper. March 5th. The betrayal is certain. I gave him keys to my house, my heart, and he sold both. He told them my secrets. He led them to my coffers. When I shouted, he smiled. When I begged, he struck. My friend is ash in my eyes. I curse his name. I curse this place. Let it burn, let it smoke, let it choke every breath until the truth is spoken. The entries grew darker, angrier, each one circling back to betrayal, to loss, to smoke, and always the refrain, like an oath carved into the book. Smoke remembers. Smoke remembers. As Alex read, the air grew heavier. The smoke thickened until it curled over the pages, blurring the ink. He waved it away, but it moved like it had will, swirling into words across the surface. He betrayed me, Alex whispered. Who? The smoke shifted. A name began to form, but broke apart before he could read it. Instead, the voice came, louder now, more distinct. Find him, the one who sold me, the one who smiled as I burned. Alex's skin prickled cold. His eyes darted to the shelves, to the corners of the study, half expecting to see someone standing there. But the only movement was the smoke, coiling, pressing, reaching. He kept turning pages. One entry froze him. March 12th. I saw him again tonight. He walked past the house with his head low, yet I swear he looked at my window. He thinks me blind, but I see. The curse will hold him. The smoke will take him. The house will never release me until his name is spoken, until the betrayal is undone. The last lines were jagged, smeared as if written in rage. I will wait. I will choke every heir, every trespasser, every fool who dares this house until one voice finds courage, until one voice says his name. Then I may rest. Alex's fingers trembled on the page. The words pulsed in his mind like a heartbeat. One voice. The smoke shifted around him, brushing his arms, curling near his face. It carried the smell of burnt wood and something saltier, like tears. And then, faint but undeniable, came another whisper. Yours. The flashlight flickered. Alex slammed the journal shut, clutching it to his chest. His pulse thundered in his ears. He staggered back toward the doorway, coughing as the smoke pressed harder, curling into his mouth, his throat. He stumbled into the corridor, gasping for air, but the smoke followed. It whispered all around him now, overlapping voices weaving into a single desperate demand. Find him, find him, find him. He pressed his back to the wall, sliding down until he sat clutching the journal, sweat chilling his skin. Okay, he rasped. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out. Okay, I'll try. I'll find him. The house stilled. For the first time, the smoke pulled back, not gone, but thinner, like the house itself had exhaled in relief. Alex wiped his mouth with a shaking hand, eyes burning. He didn't know who the betrayer was, or how he would ever find a man long dead. But the house had bound him now. The smoke had chosen him, and somewhere inside its walls, he would find the truth or choke trying. The house darkened as if the clouds outside had thickened. Though Alex knew it wasn't weather, the smoke carried its own shadow. It pressed against the windows, curled across the floorboards, and rose until it licked his knees. The journal weighed heavy in his hands. Each word burned in his mind. One voice, one name. But what name? The smoke answered with a hiss, as if hearing his thoughts. It swirled up the wall and spread like ink across plaster, forming shapes, blotches, outlines. And then he saw it. A face. It was blurry at first, features smudged by shifting vapor. A man in his 30s maybe, broad-shouldered, with hair tied back the way men wore it in the old photographs Alex had seen at school. His mouth was set in a hard line. His hand curled around a key that gleamed faintly even through the haze. The image flickered, replaced by another two men, standing close together in a parlor that once had life. One leaned forward, laughing, a hand on the other's shoulder. Brothers, Alex thought. Friends, trust heavy in their closeness. The smoke shifted again. Now the same man smiling before stood in shadow, whispering to strangers at the edge of town. Coins passed between hands. The journal's words echoed in Alex's head. He traded my trust for gold. Alex whispered. It was his friend. The smoke shivered as if pleased. The vision didn't stop. The fog rolled thicker, filling the study, the hall, wrapping around Alex until he was choking. But when he coughed, the haze thinned just enough to show him more. The betrayed man, his host, his ghost, sat writing furiously at the desk. Ink smeared his fingers. Tears streaked his cheeks. He scratched words into the journal. Smoke remembers. Behind him, the betrayer walked silently through the door, a knife glinting at his side. Alex staggered back, heart hammering. No, he whispered. Don't. But the smoke showed it anyway. The blade, the shout, the fire that came after. The betrayed man's body fell, but his eyes, clouded white, filled with smoke, kept staring, even as the house roared with flames. Alex pressed his hands over his face, but it didn't block the visions. The smoke didn't care if his eyes were shut. It filled his mind, pouring images until he felt his skull splitting. He saw the betrayer again and again, smiling at the family, shaking hands with strangers, standing outside while the fire consumed the house. And always, in every vision, the betrayer's eyes gleamed with a cruel satisfaction. The smoke whispered, "Say his name." Alex dropped his hands, gasping. "I don't know it." "Oh." The fog surged, tightening around him like fists. "Find it." He stumbled into another room, dragging the journal with him. The library had collapsed shelves, books scattered in damp heaps. He rifled through them with frantic hands, coughing as smoke curled between the pages. Letters, contracts, receipts. all blurred by water damage. But then at the bottom of a warped trunk, he found a folded parchment. It was brittle, but legible. Adid, signed by two men, Samuel Whitlock, Thomas Gray. Alex's breath caught. The journal had never named the betrayer, but here, in sharp black ink, was his partner, his supposed brother, in all but blood, Thomas Gray. The smoke surged high, whirling in the air like a storm. Faces formed again, dozens this time shifting between Samuel, betrayed and burning, and Thomas, smiling as the house fell. Alex clutched the deed, knuckles white. His throat felt raw, but he forced the name out anyway. Thomas Gray. The room went silent. Every whisper cut off. Every face dissolved. The smoke froze, suspended in midair. For the first time since stepping into the house, Alex felt it not heavy, not suffocating, but waiting. He had found the betrayer. The curse was listening. But silence didn't mean peace. The fog began to twist tighter, coiling around the ceiling beams, sliding across the floor like serpents. A voice rose from within, layered and jagged, broken by rage. He never paid. He never confessed. He never burned. Make him burn. Alex stumbled back, shaking his head. He's dead. It's over. It happened 100 years ago. The smoke surged toward him, searing his throat. He gagged, eyes watering. Not over. Not until I am free. The journal slipped from his hands, pages scattering. The smoke coiled through them, lifting them into the air like wings. Words glowed faintly, branded into the paper. One voice, one name, one truth spoken aloud. Alex coughed, voice breaking. Thomas Gray betrayed Samuel Whitlock. He killed him. He burned this house. The smoke paused. The silence was sharp, almost painful. And then, deep within the walls, something sighed. Long, relieved. The floorboards stopped groaning. The wallpaper stilled. The house seemed to loosen its grip. Alex fell to his knees, clutching the deed to his chest, breath ragged. The smoke still hung around him, but softer now, like a veil instead of a prism. And through it, faint and fleeting, he saw a figure. Samuel Whitlock, eyes clear this time, face gentle. The ghost looked at Alex and nodded. The house should have quieted after Samuel Whitlock's name was spoken. But instead, the silence trembled, strained, as though the building itself was holding its breath. Alex pushed himself to his feet, chest aching. He clutched the deed in one hand, the journal in the other. His flashlight sputtered and died, leaving only the shifting glow of smoke. It was not gone. The smoke thickened again, curling faster, circling the study in a vortex. It carried the sound of crackling wood splitting, flames chewing through timber. The walls glowed faintly orange, though no fire had been lit. Alex's pulse spiked. No, he whispered. No, it's over. But the house didn't agree. The smoke surged higher, and the world around him changed. He was no longer standing in a ruined study. He was inside the fire. Flames roared up the walls, licking the ceiling beams until they sagged and cracked. The air boiled. Smoke clawed at his throat, thick and acrid, burning his lungs with every gasp. The heat seared his skin, and through the flames he saw them. Samuel face pale, eyes furious, blood staining his shirt. His hand reached for Alex as if demanding witness. And Thomas standing outside the window, shadow sharp against the firelight, lips curled into a smile. The betrayal replayed itself in endless loop. Samuel shouting, Thomas turning away, the flames swallowing everything. The smoke screamed, voices overlapping. He betrayed me. He betrayed me. Burn him. Burn them all. Alex stumbled back, coughing violently. His eyes watered. His chest heaved. The house wanted him to feel it. The rage, the choking injustice, the endless loop of fire and betrayal. And it wanted him to choose. He gripped the journal tighter. Pages flapped wildly in the heated wind, glowing faintly with Samuel's words. The house will never release me until his name is spoken, until the betrayal is undone. But what did undone mean? The smoke's voices demanded vengeance. But beneath them, faint as a thread of violin in a storm, another voice whispered, not vengeance, release. The flames surged higher, wrapping around Alex, pressing closer. The heat was unbearable now. His skin slicked with sweat. He screamed hoarsely, it's too late, he's dead, Thomas Gray is dead. The fire screamed back, consuming his words. The smoke formed Samuel's face, eyes wild, teeth bared. It lunged forward, shouting through the crackle. He never paid. Make him pay. Alex's heart hammered. He wanted to scream yes. He wanted to spit the betrayal back at the world, curse Thomas Gray's name until the walls collapsed. But he remembered the journal, the final entry smeared with desperation. One voice, one truth. Then I may rest. Not rage, not vengeance, truth. He forced himself to his knees, choking on the smoke. His hands trembled as he clutched the journal, reading aloud over the roar of the fire. Samuel Whitlock was betrayed. He was wronged. His friend Thomas Gray took everything from him. The smoke screamed in agreement, pressing tighter, threatening to crush him. Alex's voice cracked, but he forced it louder. Yes, it happened. The betrayal was real. Then he faltered. The fire twisted around him, daring him to say more, daring him to condemn, to curse. Instead, he took a shaking breath and whispered, "But it ends here." The smoke froze. The fire halted mid-crackle, flames suspended in air. Alex coughed, vision blurring, but he pushed the words out. "I can't undo what he did. I can't punish a man already in the ground. But I can end it. You deserved better, Samuel. You deserved loyalty. And I'm sorry that you never got it." The suspended flames flickered, confused. He pressed his palm to the floor, knuckles white. Thomas Gray betrayed you. That was the truth. But holding on to it won't change what happened. You've carried it long enough. Let it go. Be free. The silence after was suffocating. The fire wavered. The smoke shuddered. And then Samuel appeared again, not in rage, but in sorrow. His face pale, lined with grief. His lips trembled, eyes wet. "Let it go?" his voice asked, thin and breaking. Alex nodded, tears streaking through soot. "Yes, let it go." The smoke howled, furious, resisting. It swirled tighter, clawing at Alex's arms, his throat, trying to smother the word. But Samuel's figure raised a hand, not in rage, but in surrender. The howling stopped, the fire dimmed, and the smoke, thick as storm, dissolved into pale ribbons that drifted upward, out of the cracks, into the night sky. Alex collapsed, coughing violently, chest aching, eyes burning. The floorboards beneath him cooled. The journal lay open at his side, pages still fluttering though no wind blew. The last line glowed faintly, as though written anew. Smoke remembers, but smoke also forgives. The letters faded, and the page went blank. When Alex looked up, Samuel was gone. The study stood silent. The wallpaper sagged. The shelves leaned. The smoke had vanished entirely, and for the first time since anyone could remember, the house did not breathe. It simply rested. The night had broken. For the first time since Alex had stepped through the swollen doors, the air inside the house felt breathable, thin, sharp with mildew and dust, but free of the suffocating smoke. His lungs ached from coughing, but each breath no longer scraped raw. He pushed himself to his feet. His knees shook, his arms trembled, but the silence around him was steady. Not the waiting silence of something holding back, but a quiet, earned. The house was empty, truly empty. He moved through the corridors slowly, flashlight clutched in his hand, though he barely needed it. The glow of dawn was bleeding through cracks in the shutters, soft pink and gold slipping across broken floorboards. The wallpaper no longer shifted. The furniture no longer groaned. And yet, Alex couldn't shake the feeling he was not alone. Not haunted, no, not anymore, but accompanied. In the gallery, he stopped. The smoke had always lingered thickest here, cooling at the feet of portraits with missing faces, curling through glass frames. But now the room lay still. Dust floated in beams of light. On the far wall, a mirror leaned cracked against the plaster. Alex stared into it. For a moment, he braced himself to see Samuel's pale eyes or Margaret's smile or something worse. But he only saw himself, a boy with soot streaked across his cheeks, hair damp with sweat, eyes wide and tired. And then, a shadow behind him. Not a figure, not a threat, just the faintest impression of someone standing with him, a presence more felt than seen. He whispered, "Samuel." The mirror clouded faintly, a wisp of white fog curling across the glass before dissolving. Not gone, Alex thought. Not entirely. He left the gallery and stepped back into the foyer. The front door hung half open, swollen wood groaning. As the morning air pushed in, he hesitated at the threshold. The house was quiet now, but stepping out felt like abandoning it, like closing a chapter no one else had read. He looked down at the journal still in his hands. Its pages were blank now, every word dissolved into pale paper. Yet when he touched the cover, he felt warmth lingering there, as if the ink still smoldered beneath. The smoke had erased its story from the page because it had given it to him instead. Alex stepped outside. The yard was heavy with dew, weeds bending under droplets. Mist clung low to the ground, but it was ordinary mist this time, thin, cool, carrying the smell of wet earth instead of fire. The sky blushed with sunrise. Birds stirred in the trees. The world, indifferent to curses and betrayals, was waking. He stood on the porch, clutching the journal, and realized how quiet it felt without the whisper of smoke curling at his ears. The quiet was almost worse, because now the voice was inside him. As he walked back down the road, sneakers crunching gravel, memories spilled across his mind unbidden. Samuel laughing in the parlor, Samuel betrayed in the fire, Samuel screaming, then silent. The house hadn't just shown him visions, it had pressed them into him, and though the smoke had lifted, Alex knew it had left its mark. He wasn't just the boy who had walked into the cursed house and survived. He was the boy who remembered. By the time the town came into view, the sun was high enough to burn the mist away. The streets were ordinary again, cars passing, dogs barking behind fences, neighbors watering their gardens. Ordinary, but Alex carried something none of them could see. He stopped at the corner where the sidewalk cracked, staring back once toward the line of trees that hid the house. From this distance it looked harmless, just another abandoned shell. And yet, in the morning light, he thought he saw the faintest curl of smoke lift from one of its chimneys. Not choking, not heavy, just a ribbon, rising like a sigh. That night, Alex lay in bed with the journal on his desk. Blank pages glowed faintly in the lamplight. He picked up a pen. At first, he only stared at the paper, hand trembling. Then, slowly, he began to write. Samuel Whitlock was betrayed by Thomas Gray. His house burned. His soul was bound. Smoke remembered when the world forgot. The words flowed without effort, as though whispered into his ear. He wrote not just what he had seen, but what he had felt: the rage, the grief, the choking need for justice. And when he was done, he didn't close the journal. He left it open on his desk, pages fluttering faintly in the night breeze, because he understood now. The smoke had chosen him. Weeks later, he passed the house again. It was still sagging, still strangled by ivy, but no smoke curled from its windows, no whispers pressed against the glass. Yet, as Alex lingered at the gate, he felt it again, that quiet presence. Not desperate, not angry, just waiting. And he realized the curse hadn't been destroyed. It had been changed. The burden wasn't on the house anymore. It was on him. He walked away, journal heavy in his backpack, the words etched in his mind. The town would forget. They always did. But Alex would remember, because smoke might forgive, but smoke never forgets. Story 7. The fourth floor. Mark had lived in the building so long, he no longer noticed its flaws. The yellowed wallpaper that peeled at the seams, the buzz of old fluorescent lights that sometimes flickered for days before they died. The faint smell of mildew that rose every summer from the basement. It was all background noise now, part of the rhythm of his life. The building was old, but stable, predictable. 3 floors, no more, no less. His apartment was on the 3rd, tucked into the corner of a narrow hall with warped floorboards and doors painted a shade of beige that had faded into gray. Mark knew every creak of this place, every angle of light that fell through the cracked windows, every hum of the radiators when the pipes woke up in the winter. At 62, routine was a kind of shield. He woke at 7, walked to the corner store for groceries, read until he nodded off in his chair, slept, repeated. The building was small enough that he knew all the tenants by sound, if not by name. The coughing man on the 1st floor, the young couple with the baby on the 2nd. 3 floors, always 3. So when he woke that night abrupt, heart hammering in the dark, and saw a figure standing in the hall outside his door, his mind stalled. At first, he thought he was still dreaming. The glow from the hallway light cut a pale square across the floor of his apartment, and in it, framed by the door's peephole glass, stood a girl. She was too still, her outline sharp, her shadow stretching across the hall. She didn't move when he sat up. didn't shift when he rubbed his eyes. Mark slid his legs out of bed, joints protesting, and padded barefoot across the worn carpet. He pressed an eye to the peephole. The girl stood less than 3 feet away. She looked no more than 16. Dark hair fell in limp strands around a face he could barely make out, washed out by the buzzing light overhead. She wore something old-fashioned, a dress that hung too long at the sleeves, its hem brushing the floor, and she was staring at his door. Not at the peephole, not at him, just the door. Mark's breath stuttered. "Hello?" The word left his lips before he could stop it, too loud in the empty apartment. The girl lifted her head. Her lips moved. He couldn't hear her, not through the door, but the shape of the words was clear. "4th floor." Mark pulled back from the peephole, heart jolting. He stood in the dark, hands clenched at his sides, brain stuttering against the words. The building had 3 floors. It had always had 3 floors. He knew it the way he knew his own address, the way he knew his own name, and yet she had said it again, soft but clear, as though the word itself wanted to seep under his door. 4th floor. Mark swallowed hard, tongue dry. "You've got the wrong place," he whispered, though no one could hear him. "There is no 4th floor," but curiosity gnawed at him. He pressed his eye back to the peephole. The girl was closer now, so close her breath fogged the glass. Her eyes, dark and heavy, met his, and she smiled. Mark staggered back, nearly tripping over the rug. The apartment felt smaller, the walls pressing close, the shadows too thick in the corners. He wanted to call the super, the police, anyone but who would believe him. An old man woken in the night by a girl who asked for a floor that didn't exist. He squeezed his eyes shut, forced his breath to steady. Go back to bed. This is a dream. It's just a dream. But when he opened his eyes again, the glow under the door had changed. No longer a steady rectangle. It pulsed, slow, like breath, and beneath it, faint, came the sound of footsteps, not walking away, descending, down a staircase that should not have been there. Mark pressed his palms to the door, head spinning. He knew the building. He had lived here longer than most of its tenants combined. There was no hidden staircase, no secret floor. He had seen the plans once. Yellowing blueprints framed in the lobby. Basement, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. That was all. And yet those steps, hollow, echoing, falling away into some place he could not name. The girl's voice floated back, muffled through the wood, sweeter now, almost coaxing. "Come see the 4th floor." His knees weakened. Every rational part of him screamed to lock the door, crawl back into bed, bury himself beneath the blankets, and wait for dawn. But routine, the same routine that had carried him through decades, suddenly felt fragile, thin, like paper that had been folded too many times. And behind it, something darker called. The part of him that had been alone too long, that had wondered if the building might outlast him, that had sometimes felt the walls lean closer as if listening. That part wanted to know. Mark's hand shook as he slid back the chain. The door creaked open. The hall was empty. No girl. No shadow. Only the stairwell door at the far end, ajar, and from its darkness, the faint echo of descending steps. Mark stood frozen, breath shallow. The hall lights buzzed. The air smelled faintly of iron, or dust, or something older, and then faint. Drifting upward like smoke from a fire long gone, the girl's voice rose again. "Come down, Mr. Halpern." She knew his name. The stairwell swallowed her words, pulling them lower, lower. Mark's heart thudded. His hands curled against his sides. He should have turned back. He should have slammed the door shut. But instead, bare feet cold on the warped wood, he stepped into the hall and followed. The stairwell door hung open like a mouth. Mark paused at the threshold, heart rattling against his ribs. The girl's voice had already faded, drawn down into the depths. He half expected the stairwell to look exactly as it always had, narrow, dusty, lined with metal rails painted in layers of peeling cream. But when he stepped through, the air changed. It was colder, damp with something that smelled of wet concrete. The light overhead buzzed weakly, flickered, then steadied. Shadows clung in the corners, too thick for a place he'd walked 1,000 times before. Mark gripped the rail and began to descend. At first, nothing seemed strange. 2 flights down, and he should have been at the ground floor. The radiator pipes hummed faintly through the walls. Familiar. The stairwell turned in its usual square, concrete landing. iron rails worn smooth by decades of hands. But when he pushed through the door, expecting the lobby, he froze. The hall stretched longer than it should have. It was the second floor, wasn't it? The numbering on the door read 2. But the corridor was too wide, its ceiling too low. The wallpaper hung in wet strips, darker than upstairs, and the lights overhead swayed as if from some unseen draft. He took one cautious step. The floor groaned, soft, spongy under his weight. Something dripped from the ceiling and spattered his arm. It was clear, like water, but warm. Mark shivered. He backed into the stairwell again, pulse racing, and let the door swing shut. His feet carried him down another flight. This time he expected the ground floor, but when he pressed through the door marked 1, the hallway was not the lobby. It was narrower now, walls pressing in, doors lined either side, dozens more than should have fit in the building. Each door was painted the same dull beige, but every handle was a different shape, some brass, some iron, some bone-white knobs that looked disturbingly organic. Mark's stomach churned. The air reeked of copper, like pennies left too long in a wet pocket. He reached for one door handle on instinct, then froze. The handle twitched beneath his palm. Something on the other side inhaled. Mark yanked his hand back, slamming the door shut. The stairwell swallowed him again. He gripped the rail tighter. His knuckles ached, sweat slicking the iron. "This isn't real," he whispered. "There are only 3 floors." But his voice didn't sound like his own. It bounced off the walls, muffled, like he was already deeper underground. The girl's voice floated up from below, faint, lilting. "4th floor." He descended, down past where the basement should have been. The steps seemed endless now, spiraling tighter, each landing leading only to another set of doors, with numbers that made no sense. 0, -1, -2. He tried the one marked basement. Behind it stretched a corridor lined with storage cages, but the cages didn't hold bicycles or boxes. They held chairs, and in each chair sat something bound in cloth, shrouded in burlap like bodies awaiting burial. The cloth shifted as he watched. One head tilted, slow and stiff. Mark's chest clenched. He slammed the door, his breath ragged. The stairs waited. Down again. Time warped. He didn't know how long he had been descending. His calves burned, his knees throbbed, but the steps never ended. And then at last he saw it. The landing door was painted black. Rust streaked down its edges, and bolted to the center was a number. S. Mark froze, one hand clamped on the rail. His body buzzed with wrongness, a fevered heat crawling his skin. There was no 4th floor. There had never been a 4th floor. And yet, here it was. The stairwell light flickered. For a heartbeat, the girl stood on the landing below him, hair covering her face, one hand raised as if beckoning. When the light steadied, she was gone, but the black door remained, waiting. Mark's pulse thundered. His throat felt raw. Every instinct told him to turn back, to climb until his lungs gave out, to flee the way he had come. But when he glanced upward, the stairs had changed. Where there should have been landings, railings, flights leading back up, there was only shadow. Endless, swallowing shadow. No way back. Only down. Only through. His hand shook as he reached for the knob. It was cold, wet, and when he twisted, the door didn't resist. It opened inward with a groan that rattled his bones, and from the darkness beyond spilled a breath of air, hot, damp, and thick with the stench of rot. Mark gagged, covering his mouth. But beneath the stench came something else. A voice. Not the girl's this time. Lower. Raw. "Welcome, Mark." The door shut behind him with the weight of finality. A sound too heavy for wood. A sound that said, "You will not go back." Mark's stomach clenched. The air pressed close, humid and stale, as though he had stepped inside the lungs of some great body. The corridor stretched long and narrow before him. Its walls bent slightly inward, bowed like a tunnel that had sunk under its own weight. The light was wrong. Dim yellow bulbs hung every few feet, but their glow didn't fall straight, it slanted, stuttering, as if each filament pulsed to a heartbeat not his own. He had the dizzying thought that the hallway wasn't lit from above at all, but from within the walls themselves. He walked. The floor sagged beneath his weight, a carpet too damp, fibers slick like moss. His shoes left dark prints that closed almost immediately behind him. Doors lined both sides, identical beige, but warped. their surfaces bubbling as though something underneath pressed to escape. Mark's throat tightened. He could hear them, the whispers, faint at first, like the hiss of wind through cracks, but the longer he listened, the more words surfaced. "Don't look. Stay with me. Why did you leave?" Each door whispered differently, voices overlapping in a chorus that clawed at his mind. Some were high-pitched, some gravelly, some sobbing. He stopped at one door, breath shaking, ear pressed near. The voice behind it was unmistakably a child's. "Daddy, Daddy, open." Mark staggered back, bile rising. He had no children, never had, and yet the voice knew how to make his gut twist. He hurried on. The corridor bent, or perhaps he couldn't tell anymore. His vision swam, and the walls seemed to breathe, inhaling as he exhaled, exhaling as he tried to hold still. Another door stood half open ahead. A thin strip of darkness leaked through the crack. Mark reached for it, against his better judgment, and pushed it open. Inside was a room, at first glance ordinary. Peeling wallpaper, broken dresser, dust motes swirling. But hanging from the ceiling beam was a rope, its fibers frayed, the noose swaying gently as though touched by a breeze. No body, just the rope. Mark's chest tightened, heart rattling against his ribs. He couldn't look away. The rope twisted, slow, deliberate, and then he heard it, the creak of a beam bearing weight. He slammed the door shut. He hurried faster down the corridor, but the whispers rose, louder now, desperate. "Come inside. He's waiting. Don't run." His palms sweated. His knees wobbled. Every door he passed seemed to thrum. Shadows slid beneath them, long-fingered, stretching toward his feet. At one point he swore he felt a hand brush his ankle. He nearly cried out, stumbling forward. But when he glanced back, the corridor stretched empty, doors lined neat and endless. The air grew thicker the farther he went, not just stale, now sour. The stink of sweat, mildew, and something sweet like spoiled fruit. He wiped his forehead, only to find his hands slick with condensation. The walls were damp, droplets beating and rolling down like sweat. He forced himself onward. Each step felt heavier, like the floor clung to his shoes, trying to drag him under. At last the hallway widened into a landing, and there, waiting at the center, stood the girl. She was clearer now in the sickly light, young, hair matted, her dress darker than before as though damp. She faced him, her head cocked at a strange angle, eyes catching the dim light. Mark swallowed hard. His voice cracked. Why did you bring me here?" The girl smiled faintly. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "Fourth floor." Then she turned, pointing toward the far end of the hall. Mark's gaze followed. Another door waited there, larger than the rest, its wood darker, its frame lined with cracks. Unlike the others, it didn't whisper. It was silent, too silent, and from beneath it seeped a shadow darker than shadow should be. Mark took one step forward. His knees nearly buckled. The girl stepped aside, hands folded neatly before her, as if her part was done. Mark forced another step. His ears rang, drowned in whispers, but beneath them a new sound began to swell, thick, wet, uneven, breathing, not from behind the door, from above it. He tilted his head, and there, just visible through the dim bulbs, a shape dangled from the ceiling beam. A woman, her body limp, her neck twisted wrong inside a rope that creaked as it swung, and her eyes pale, empty, wide, locked onto his. Mark froze, breath gone, knees buckling. The whispers fell silent in an instant, as though every voice in the corridor had turned to watch. The rope groaned. The woman's body rotated slowly, like she was facing him fully now. Her eyes did not blink. Her lips parted, and though no sound escaped, Mark felt the words scrape across his bones. "Stay." The woman swayed, not by wind, not by accident. The rope creaked like a metronome, measuring out the beats of Mark's pulse. Every swing brought her closer, though her feet never touched the ground. Her head lolled, neck stretched at an angle no living body could bear. The eyes open, milk pale, void of detail, tracked him. Always him. Mark staggered back a step. The air thickened, dense as syrup, clinging to his throat. I don't belong here," he rasped. The whispers returned, filling the corridor. But now, they all chanted one word in unison. "Stay. Stay." Stay. The woman's lips peeled into a smile that didn't fit her face, and then her body jerked violently, rope snapping taut. With a sickening lurch, she swung toward him. Mark turned and ran. The hallway stretched on endlessly, every bulb flickering to the rhythm of his pounding feet. Doors slammed open as he passed, spewing shadows that reached for his ankles. Fingers brushed his shirt, his hair. A child's giggle echoed in his ears. He crashed against the stairwell door, wrenching it open. Concrete steps spiraled upward. Relief flooded him. He could escape. He would climb until his chest burst if he had to. He threw himself upward, 2 steps at a time. His lungs burned, his calves screamed. Finally, a landing. He pushed through the door and staggered into the same hallway, the same sagging walls, the same whispering doors, and at the far end, the same dark door, and the same body swaying above it. Mark's knees nearly gave. "No," he whispered. His voice cracked like broken glass. "No, I went up, but the corridor didn't care." The whispers swelled, louder, crueler. "Stay, stay, stay." The woman twitched on her rope, swinging harder now. Her eyes bore into him, anchoring him in place. Mark stumbled backward into the stairwell again. He looked up, forcing his aching legs to climb higher. Faster. Sweat drenched his face, his shirt. His heart thudded like it might crack his ribs. Another landing. Another door. He burst through it and froze. The 4th floor again. The whispers again. The woman again. He pressed his palms to his temples, dizziness sweeping him. This isn't real. This can't be real. But the walls inhaled around him. The lights throbbed like veins. The rope creaked, and the woman's body convulsed. Her hands twitched at her sides, stiff and jerky. One arm bent upward, elbow locked, and her finger pointed directly at him. Mark stumbled back, spine hitting the damp wall. His breath came in ragged gasps. "I'm not staying," he choked out, but the whispers only laughed. 100 voices, 1,000, overlapping until the sound was thunder. "Stay, stay, stay." He bolted again. This time he barreled downward, past the landing marked 3, 2, 1. The numbers blurred, flickered, disappeared. He lost count, lost direction. His knees screamed. His breath ripped at his lungs. The air grew hotter, thicker, every step pulling him deeper. At last he burst through another door, the 4th floor. Again, the same sagging hall, the same dark door at the far end. And this time, the woman's body was closer. Her toes nearly brushed the floor. Mark fell to his knees. Tears stung his eyes. His chest convulsed with dry sobs. "Please, let me go. Please." The whispers softened, almost tender. "Stay." The girl appeared again. She stood at the side of the hallway, head tilted, hair clinging damp to her cheeks. She smiled faintly, eyes dark hollows in the flickering light. "You followed me," she said. Her voice was delicate, fragile. "So now you're here." Mark's teeth chattered. "What is this place?" "The 4th floor," she said simply, as though no further answer was needed. She stepped back into the wall, her body fading like mist. And the rope above groaned as the woman swung harder, her eyes wide, fixed, eternal. Mark crawled toward the stairwell one last time. His fingers scraped the damp floor. His body shook with exhaustion. He dragged himself through the door, onto the stairs, and forced himself upward. He climbed until his vision swam. His knees buckled. His chest heaved. Finally, another door. He burst through it, praying for daylight, for the familiar hum of the lobby, for anything but what he knew waited. The hallway stretched before him, sagging, whispers rising, and the woman swayed. Her face was closer now, so close he could see the bruising around her neck, the slack skin, the dead eyes that were somehow still alive. And when her lips moved this time, sound finally came, a guttural, rasping whisper, cutting straight into him. "You can never leave the 4th floor." Mark's legs gave out halfway down the corridor. His knees hit the floor with a wet smack, the damp carpet clinging to his skin through the thin fabric of his pajama bottoms. His chest heaved, lungs dragging in the sour, breathless air. No matter how he tried, it wasn't enough. He could never draw in enough. The walls leaned closer with every inhalation, ribs of a beast ready to crush him. The woman above creaked on her rope, each sway louder, more deliberate. The whispers that had once filled every doorway now fell silent, as if all those unseen mouths were waiting for her to speak. Mark pressed his forehead to the wall. "Please," he whispered hoarsely. "I just want to go home." Home. The word felt childish, absurd. Where was home now? He pushed himself back up, staggering toward the stairwell door. His hands slipped on the rail, slick with condensation. The stairs spiraled upward, endless. He forced one step, then another, each motion like dragging iron weights. At the next landing, he shoved through the door. The fourth floor. He slammed it shut, teeth chattering. He staggered up again, higher, higher, until his body screamed for mercy. He burst through another door, the fourth floor, and again, and again. The floor was inescapable, a loop stitched into the marrow of the building. At some point, he stopped climbing. The door banged shut behind him, and he didn't even bother turning back. He stood in the same endless corridor, the same sagging wallpaper, the same whispers clawing from behind beige doors. Only the woman had changed. She hung lower now, her rope groaning, her chin tilted so far back the tendons stood out like ropes themselves. Her eyes locked on him with such force his muscles trembled, as though she were pulling him closer without touching him. Mark raised a hand weakly. "Why me?" the whispers answered, 100 mouths pressed to his ears. "Because you opened the door." The girl appeared again. At first he didn't notice her, just a pale blur at the edge of his vision. But when he turned, she stood in the crook of the hallway, head tilted, hair dripping with something dark. "You followed," she said gently like a teacher praising a child. "That means you belong here." Mark shook his head, though the movement was barely more than a tremor. "No, I don't. I'm not." Her eyes narrowed. "You are now." "Oh." Then she faded into the wall, leaving behind only the smell of rot. Mark turned back to the woman. She no longer swayed gently. Her body jerked like a marionette, twitching against the rope as if invisible strings commanded her. Her arms lifted, stiff and angular. One hand pointed down the corridor. Mark's legs moved before he could stop them. His feet dragged, slow, pulling him toward the dark door at the far end. Every step heavier than the last, every breath shallower. The whispers rose again, chanting in rhythm with his dragging feet. "Stay, stay, stay." He reached the door, close now. He could see the wood was not wood at all. It pulsed faintly, veins running beneath its surface. The knob throbbed like a heart. Mark's hand lifted against his will. "No," he croaked, tears spilling hot down his face. "Please, don't make me." The rope above groaned. The woman's body spun slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Her lips moved again, and this time the sound rattled in his skull. "Be part of us." His fingers closed on the knob. The door swung open. Inside was not a room, not a hallway. Inside was another stairwell, but not his stairwell. This one spiraled downward into a throat of blackness, lit by no bulbs, lined by no rail. The air that wafted out was warm, damp, and filled with the stench of breath millions of lungs exhaling at once. Mark fell to his knees. The journal of his life, his routines, his quiet years, all felt absurd now. Small, laughable. He was nothing but another name the floor had pulled down. The whispers converged into one voice, low and final. "There is no home. There is only the fourth floor." Mark doesn't remember collapsing. He only remembers the feeling of the rope tightening not around his neck, but through his limbs, his chest, his jaw. Strings, invisible, inescapable. His body lifted, not physically, but in a way worse than physical, as if he were being stitched into the walls themselves. And then there was silence. The building above woke to morning. Tenants brewed coffee, argued over shower schedules, walked babies in strollers down cracked sidewalks. For them, the building was still 3 floors, as it had always been. But sometimes, when the lights flickered in the hall, someone swore they saw a door where there hadn't been one. A door marked fear, and through its peephole, if you dared to look, you might see a man standing at the far end of a long corridor. His shoulders stooped, his eyes hollow, his lips parting soundlessly as though calling for help. But the moment you blinked, he was gone, and you were left alone with the thought, had you just seen Mark, or had you been invited to the 4th floor yourself? And that was 7 stories for tonight. 7 echoes carried through the hours we share. Stories of eyes watching through glass, of voices that drown reason, of hallways that stretch too far. But the night isn't finished. Nights like these never really end. They wait for you in the corner of a mirror, in the silence between car horns, in the stairwell when you think you're alone. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've been marked too. Perhaps in listening, you've stepped a little closer to the edge of those places. Don't worry. Most of the time, nothing follows you home. Most of the time. Thank you for keeping me company in the dark. Until the next broadcast, try to rest, if you can. This voice will still be here when you wake.